Okay, we should be coming through.
All right. Awesome. Okay. Very good.
So should we maybe lay out some context here before getting into things?
Yeah. So the context here, as I'm sure a lot of people know, is the MAHA report, the Make America Healthy Again report, Make Our Children Healthy Again edition, has been released. There's been a decent amount of news over it. The reason there's been some news over it is because they found some erroneous citations. The erroneous citations being citations that either didn't exist or were misrepresented or were not cited correctly. And the Trump administration has responded by saying, well, those are just formatting issues. So the reason we're doing this is because this is a report that's meant to impact guidelines. It's meant to impact policy. And the problems with this are far beyond citations. They're far beyond erroneous citations, whether it be formatting, whether it be citing into nowhere, whether it be citing something that you can patch up, which they have. They have changed the citations back to the whatever the correct ones were. But the issue is far deeper than that. It's that well, they don't know what they're citing. They don't know how to interpret what they're citing into the context of the literature. It doesn't appear that they don't know how to do any of this. And sometimes the citations that they have say the opposite of what they claim. Also, generally, the bigger issue here with the MAHA report is this is supposed to be a project that identifies a particular problem, a problem of chronic disease, and offers the causes of why this is happening, and offers a solution or offers the next steps to get to a solution. And in my view, after reading this, it fails on all fronts. The first, much of the items that the report identifies are not even organic items at all. They're just data artifacts, and they're not actually problems that are even there. Of the ones that are real, they're either overstated or they are genuinely real, but the solution not only is not there, but the solution is actually more harmful than the solutions that are currently on the table and being worked on. And let me just say, the point here is not even to bash the Trump administration. I voted for them after all. The purpose is to distance everyone from RFK, and including the Trump administration. RFK is embarrassing you, by the way. And I will just say that there's absolutely nothing that the Trump administration or America owes RFK. You can wash your hands of RFK anytime you want. Just do it. He's making you look bad. So let's get into it. Let's go. We're going to go through the MAHA report. We're going to establish what their claims are, what their purpose is, their stated purpose. We're going to go through each one of their claims. We're going to go through the identified problems that they suggest exist. We're going to determine whether they are artifactual issues or whether they are real organic problems. We're going to go through their proposed solutions, and we're going to be checking their claims along the way. So feel free to follow along, and let's get into it.
Okay,
So,
and I guess
mhm,
it might be worth clarifying why I'm here, why you're not just talking to a camera yourself. And
sure.
I think that I'm in the maybe kind of unfortunate position of being the stupid check. So, I mean, I'm not I don't have a medical background. I think probably most of your viewers know that. So, I guess the way Avi likes to do these things, you can kind of correct me if I'm wrong, but you know, we've done some of these big marathon streams before, like on the Joe Rogan Cresser Con craziness. And I think Avi just likes to have a layperson there to communicate with to make sure they're not getting hung up anywhere. Something kind of like that. To have the things brought up that a non-medical person might bring up to sort of ensure it's understandable or do something to make it more understandable to people who don't have a background. That's
That's
roughly the
right. The
idea.
check is if you're following along, then I'm happy with it.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah. So I've got the introduction channel up here, and I guess yeah,
Yeah.
let's
Well,
just
we're gonna
get
go
into
through
it.
the whole thing, like the whole thing. Those have the images, so we're actually gonna pull up the MAHA report.
Oh, I've got it up.
All right, and we're gonna go to where it states its purpose, just so everyone is clear on why this is being released. So that's page 5 out of 73. Purpose of this assessment. This report, Make Our Children Healthy Again assessment, is a call to action. It presents the stark reality of American children's declining health, backed by compelling data and long-term trends. More importantly, it seeks to unpack the potential dietary, behavioral, medical, and environmental drivers behind the crisis. By examining the root cause of deteriorating child health, this assessment establishes a clear evidence-based foundation for the policy interventions, institutional reforms, and societal shifts needed to reverse course. To turn the tide and better protect our children, the United States must act decisively. During this administration, we will begin reversing the childhood chronic disease crisis by confronting its root causes, not just the symptoms. This means pursuing truth-embracing science and enacting pro-growth policies and innovations to restore children's health. Today's children are tomorrow's workforce, caregivers, and leaders. We can no longer afford to ignore the crisis. This crisis. After a century of costly and ineffective approaches, the federal government will lead a coordinated transformation of our food, health, and scientific systems. This strategic realignment will ensure that all Americans today and in the future live longer, healthier lives, supported by systems that prioritize prevention, well-being, and resilience. But real transformation requires more than vision. It requires clarity. Before we act, we must fully understand the scope of the crisis, the conditions that created it, and the mechanisms through which it continues to grow. Without this foundation, interventions being reactive, fragmented, or ineffective. Interventions risk being that. To make our children healthy again, so this is the Make Our Children Healthy Again part of presumably or perhaps a multi-part series. To make our children healthy again, we must begin with a shared understanding of the magnitude of the crisis and subsequently what's likely driving it. This assessment provides that foundation, grounding future efforts in a common scientific basis that identifies the potential drivers behind the rise in childhood chronic disease that present the clearest opportunities for progress. Okay, so here are his problems. Number one, poor diet. The American diet has shifted dramatically toward ultra-processed foods. Number two, aggregation of environmental chemicals. Number three, lack of physical activity and chronic stress. And number four, over-medicalization. By examining each of these drivers, this assessment equips MAHA Commission stakeholders and partners with the facts needed to identify where and how policy interventions will likely have the most impact. The sections that follow will analyze the evidence, spotlight gaps, and map the terrain, laying the groundwork for coordinated high-impact solutions. Okay, so that is the purpose of the MAHA report. He thinks that he is going to find, or that he has found, a big problem. The problem being real and the problem being identifiable, and having a root cause analysis. He's gonna identify the root causes of the issues, and he's going to propose solutions, or at least where to go next for the solutions. So we'll go through to the introduction.
Okay, so before we get
Mhm.
there, let me just make sure I'm understanding this. So
Mhm.
the report is basically saying there's a crisis. It's children's declining health, and the goal seems to be to explain why that's happening. Let's see. Are they
Mhm.
talking about establishing that it's happening, or
He
are they
he.
starting from explaining why
So
and
so
assuming it's
so
happening?
well, so this report is about children, although I believe he thinks there's a crisis for everything, which he does, for all ages. But yes, so he's going to he thinks there's a crisis, so he thinks it is real. So he thinks there is a real problem. He thinks there are real problems. He thinks that there also are real root causes that we haven't been paying attention to, that we haven't been recognizing that we should. And he thinks that it at least is somewhat more informed on the answers, on the solutions, on where we need to go to address them.
Okay. So basically, there's a crisis. They're framing it in terms of children, but you say his views are broader than that, and perhaps that will
Mhm.
be obvious by the kind of language and things we see
Yeah.
in the report. So there's a health crisis. It's America's children. Their health is declining. Does he say how yet? Not.
Talking to your mic, by the way, Isaac. Don't forget, because you're a little quiet.
Oh, yeah, because I can't do much more without it starting to get
Yeah,
gamey, sadly. So
it's fine.
yeah, and my
All right.
standard complaint or response to anyone who complains about my sound is that if you want to buy me a lav mic, you can be the person to make this problem go away. But I have trouble remembering this mic is here. Okay. Yeah. So basically, there's a problem. It's the children. Their health is declining. I don't think they specified how it's declining, but there's reasons given for this, alleged decline, and
Mhm.
we're going to be seeing an exploration of those reasons, and that exploration is supposed to give us the right kind of orientation in terms of how to solve the problem.
Correct.
Okay, all right, sounds
Okay.
ambitious. So let's go. You said you wanted to go to
Let's do it.
the.
Let's go to the introduction. Introduction.
Okay,
So
yeah.
so he says the MAHA report says the
Wait, 1
health
second. There's a
of
confusion here. When you say introduction, do you mean the
I
channel in
mean
the
the
Discord?
spending and life oh no, we can
Okay.
go, let's actually go to, I mean, it's fine either way. In this case, it's fine. Spending and life expectancy would be the channel there.
Okay, just keep in mind, I'm just showing whatever
Yeah.
you say. So if you don't say it, it doesn't come on screen.
Sure. Yeah.
I don't know if introduction, you want the MAHA report or you want the Discord stuff. What do you want on screen?
Well, it's both in this case. So if you go to the MAHA report channel, spending and life expectancy, you'll notice I took a screenshot of the points I'm addressing.
Mm-hmm.
So if you scroll all the way up,
so maybe we just do we want to just open these and talk through them one by one, or are we going to need the surrounding context in the report?
Let's go through one by one, because if there's more in the report, then I will go to the report. There will be times where I will just be reading through the report and responding in terms of just responses. But if there's actually, let's just start from the report and then we'll go to the channels. Then let's do it that way.
Yeah. How about by
default?
Go
to the report.
By default, I'm just going to always be on the report, and you tell me if we need to go to Discord, but I'll just bring it back to the report.
So let's do that.
Perfect.
Okay. All right. So introduction. The health of American children is in crisis. Despite outspending peer nations by more than double per capita on healthcare, the United States ranks last in life expectancy among high-income countries and suffers higher rates of obesity, heart disease, and diabetes. Today's children are the sickest generation in American history in terms of chronic disease, and these preventable trends continue to worsen each year, posing a threat to our nation's health, economy, and military readiness. And here there is a graph. Some of you might be familiar with this graph, or at least this sort of meme. This is life expectancy and health expenditure per capita by country. And on the x-axis, we have life expectancy in years. And then on the y-axis, we have health expenditure per capita. Just curious, have you ever seen this sort of graph before, Isaac?
No, I haven't.
All right. So it's interesting. Well, a couple of things. This is not kids. This is adults, or this is the total population, rather. But anyway, that's fine. The interesting thing about this is this used to actually be a left-wing argument. This used to be a point that Democrats would bring up, or really those on the left would bring up, about how bad our healthcare system is. It was a bad meme back then. It is still a bad meme, and it's being recycled by RFK, maybe because he was previously. I don't know. Anyway, but basically the idea is, if you look at the different various countries, comparable countries, you see that the United States is very high on health expenditure per capita, but the life expectancy in years is kind of meh. It's not really in line with what we would expect if it were performing like other countries in relation to how they spend on healthcare expenditure per capita. And so the point is that one of the elements of the crisis is our healthcare system. Like, our healthcare system is garbage, kind of. It's very inefficient. We're pumping all this money into a healthcare system, and we're not really getting much out of it. Make sense?
Uh, yeah, I'm just trying to make sure I understand the graphic correctly. So I see that there's life expectancy in years, and then there's health expenditure, but there's also a bunch of points for each. Is it just 1 point per year from 70
That's
through 23?
yes. Each point, each color is coded to a country, and each point is a data point in terms of time where that was in a various time point.
So it's a year presumably, and there's what,
Mm-hmm.
53 of them. So there's 53 dots
1970 to
for.
2023.
Okay, so there's 50 dots for each
Yeah,
country.
wherever there is data available, but yes.
Oh, so it's not
But
necessarily year by
sure.
year. It's
Well,
just
yeah. I
well,
mean,
there's
we
some,
could.
yeah.
That's not really the important
I,
point here, but
okay,
yes, we could look into see if there's any missing data,
okay,
but that's not really the
okay. But
But the
general,
general, that's the trend. Yeah.
yeah, general idea is you have life expectancy, you have health expenditure per capita, and you have this kind of time dimension that's expressed in
Hmm.
the dots basically. And we see that America is an outlier, at least prima facie. That's how it seems. It seems like they have a middling life expectancy and a much higher per capita spending. And it seems like they've been trailing off for a while from the rest of the pack. That's what I'm getting out of
Yeah.
this.
Yeah. It is. I take your point now that I'm looking at it, that it's kind of the way this graph is formatted doesn't really put a good place on which year is where the years are.
Okay,
You kind of assume it's just overlaying with the healthcare expenditure per capita.
I'm getting some audio complaints, so I don't know. Some people said it's good, other people not so much. So I don't really know. You guys will just have to let us know. I'll check it again in a few minutes. We can't sit here debugging audio, but you can let me know if it's not good, and I can try to tweak it a bit over time. But we can't spend forever fucking with that. So yeah, the solution's a better
Yeah.
mic. That's yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry. So what
Yeah.
were
So
you
I look.
saying? Yeah.
I take your point that in representing the state on a graph, the year is not
Oh, they're saying
really.
it's great.
Yeah.
It's good here. It's great. It's much better than before.
Okay.
Okay, so I
Perfect.
think we're good. Okay.
Good. So that's not the important point. Let's just assume the implicit time dimension is overlaid on the graph for the sake of. But you understand the argument then. You understand the inference, what they're trying to say.
Yeah. Basically, it seems like they're saying America spends more and doesn't get its bang for its buck. Look how shitty we are compared to these other places. They don't spend as much and they live longer.
Good. That's what they're saying. All right. Now let's go to the Discord spending and life expectancy, and let's go
Okay.
to the issues. And this is why this first meme is just that, a meme.
Well, I'm there.
Let me
I'm
know when
on the
you're there.
Discord.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. And go to life expectancy explanation. So let's explain the first part. So this is a graph that compares the different attributable differences in life expectancy expectations between the United States and its varying comparator countries. And each color is coded to a cause of death, and each or attributable cause of death, and each and the location on the graph, if it's above 0, it's contributing to an increase in the delta, which means less life expectancy for the United States. If it's below 0, it's actually means the United States is doing better.
Okay,
So
one sec.
what?
I'm
Mhm.
definitely not following this one right now. So help me get my head around
So,
what I'm looking
yeah.
at.
So what we're looking at is on the on the x-axis, it's the attributable years in life expectancy difference, and on the y-axis, we're looking at different countries,
Attributable
and the
years
reference
in life expectancy difference. For difference from what?
from from a given cause, which are color coded,
Um,
and
what's the what? Sorry, what is 0
mhm.
supposed to be here?
0 is the reference, which is the United. So
Oh,
0
difference
is
in life
so
expectancy
difference.
from
Yeah.
the United States for each of these countries,
Yes.
broken down into
Exactly.
what it's attributable, what that difference is attributable to. Okay,
Yes.
so if you see like above the 0, you see a big colored band.
Hmm.
All those years there between 0 and the top of the band, that's how much life expectancy difference there is from the United States. And the colors in the band tell you which factors, which are all listed at the top, that life expectancy difference
Yes,
can be broken down into. Gives you a sense of proportion.
exactly.
Okay, got you.
Yes.
Yep.
So if you'll notice that the the biggest chunks of life expectancy difference that's attributable for why the United States has a lower life expectancy is either something that the healthcare system doesn't really engage with that much, or if they engage with it, they engage with it somewhat, but a lot of it is just due to various choices or various lifestyles that people engage in. So, for example, a big chunk is just firearm and homicide related. People are killing each other more, drug overdoses, um, motor vehicle accidents. And then so to some degree, the healthcare system can engage with that, with mental health issues and stuff like that, but it's not the job of the healthcare system to, and in the context of children, to make sure that someone is locking away their gun properly. Like that's just not something that you can put all the money into the healthcare system that you want, but that's not going to change that attributable cause of death that is decreasing life expectancy in the United States. And then there's other things where like circulatory, okay, so there's an obesity problem and it leads to heart disease, and that's a huge thing that's killing people. And the healthcare system does engage with that. But for the most part, in terms of the root cause, it doesn't. So it's not the healthcare system's job to look over people and see what they eat. Although we'll get to that shortly with GLP-1s, which RFK is against. But for the most part, it is decisions that people make that are different. To put it frankly, we are fatter, we kill each other, and we do a lot of drugs. And that's why, for the most part, why we have lower life expectancy than other countries. And there's not much until now, I would argue, there's really not a whole lot that dumping money into the healthcare system is going to do to change that. And when you look at the attributable causes where dumping money into the healthcare system does change things, issues that the healthcare system primarily engages with, such as screenable, treatable cancers. So
Right.
you get a
Yeah.
cancer. Yeah,
You see some more of that on
exactly.
the US side.
Right. So
Below the zero line. So like the US is doing better on the things that are medically relevant. It's just often not enough to override these other.
I wouldn't say medically relevant, but like primarily engaged with the healthcare system. So less
Yeah.
attributable. Yeah.
Right.
So like, yeah, exactly. Like if a failure to appropriately screen or treat cancers for whatever, like that is just something that can be evaluated against the healthcare system. And it's not, there are decisions that people make that can influence the risk of getting cancer. Sure. But the screening procedures is a healthcare system. That's part of the healthcare system. When to screen, how to screen, are we doing a good job at screening? And are we doing a good job at treating? That is going to be a lot more impactful by healthcare spending and healthcare policies than, did we successfully prevent another firearm homicide
Right.
or injury? Like that is just, that's
like,
not something that you can dump all the money into the healthcare system, and that's not going to go down.
Yeah. So like a trivial case, you just have a population of just crack addicts or something. Like you'll probably have you'll do worse on a whole ton of things. There's probably more people dying from a whole bunch of stuff that's like due to the like massive crack problem. But you could have the best healthcare system ever. If that's what the people are doing, you could get worse overall outcomes, and then obvious compared to other countries that don't have that big a crack problem. And then obviously you're like not comparing like with like if the goal is to see how effective the healthcare system is. You want to compare the things that the healthcare system is like, I don't know, like the primary vehicle for resolving or
is the
something
primary
like that.
driver. Yes, exactly.
Right.
So if
And
you're looking at the healthcare system being the primary driver of influence, most divorced from the decisions and other choices that people simply make, or the lifestyle, like diseases of affluence, drug use, it would be deaths attributable to failure to appropriately screen or treat cancers. That is something that and when we do that, we outperform other countries.
Do we have a graph of that or something now, or are we just inferring from the
Well, yeah, you
general?
can go to the next. Well, you can go to the table if you want. I mean, that's on the graph, but if you could go to, if you want it more clearly, you can go to the next image, supplementary table 2 of that paper.
Yeah, to be clear, I understand. I think that the image you've just given makes your point, but looking at let me just start from the start, so I know we're making sense. So you have a graph. It shows the difference between life expectancy in the U.S. versus other countries, broken down in terms of what that difference is attributable to. If you
Mm-hmm.
just look at that alone, you go, oh, the US does worse. If you instead break down the things that the difference in life expectancy between US and these other countries is blamable on, if you break that down into two categories, things where medical some kind of medical process is like the primary driver to resolve it, and something where that's not the case, then we're gonna not see this discrepancy anymore. We're
Right.
instead gonna see that things favor the U.S. So I
Right. And
I get
the point is that it's what you sort of do see when you look at the examples that are most that way. So the point is that this does not show, this graph in the introduction does not show in any way that the US does not have even the best healthcare system,
right.
by the
No,
way.
no, it's a comparison that's comparing a ton of things that the healthcare system isn't the main vehicle for resolving, and then attributing whatever result you get there in terms of life expectancy difference to the US healthcare system.
Right.
Well, I guess the graph
It,
doesn't necessarily do that, but that's
well,
what's being done with
well, the
the
point is that
graph
you're
done.
comparing two variables. So it's like the point is the US can have the best healthcare per expenditure, per healthcare expenditure, and still get those results.
Right. Yeah. Like, again, trivially, if a bunch of the population is just out there like murdering each other or something like that, you could have the best healthcare
Yeah.
system on the world by a good bit and still get worse results on life expectancy.
Right.
So
And even in terms of the things that healthcare somewhat engages with, like cardiovascular disease, if you look at circulatory, it could very well, if you have decisions of people or the environment they're in which they're overeating so much that the attributable cause is circulatory or cardiovascular disease, all that could very well be just also the best healthcare system for cardiovascular disease in the United States, even though you have a greater life expectancy differential in the wrong direction for the United States. It could just be because a greater component of that is just non-healthcare system related factors.
so okay, so when I so we were going to move to the other image, but the reason that I came back to this one was you
Mm-hmm.
said the point's already made in this image. So I tried to repeat what I think the point is, and
Mm-hmm.
I get that. But
Yeah.
at looking at this image, the best, unless you sit
Mm-hmm.
there and kind of measure these things out and go through one by one and look at them all, um, it's not
No,
like
the
it's not.
point is not to say, yeah, the point is not to prove the US is the best, is the best. The point is just to say that at minimum, this is ridiculously overstated. More likely, realistically, it just doesn't show much of anything at all in terms of the type of healthcare we get for healthcare expenditure.
Okay, sorry.
And
Let me be clear. I understand the point at a high level. I'm I
Mhm.
get the broader structure of what you're trying to do with the point, but to convince someone of this, I think I don't know if we actually want to do this. It might You might just leave it as an exercise for them, but I think we do
Mhm.
kind of have to go through one by one and look at what each color is, or maybe looking at the table is the
Or what
better
you
way
can
to
do
do
is you
that.
can look at the table. You can look at the table. That might be more helpful for some people.
Yeah, because you want to
Go to the
get
table.
because like yeah, I'll just say with the graph, I see a lot of like
Hmm.
green below the line, and I see green as stuff like screenable, testable stuff. And if I kind of
Hmm.
grant like blue and red is all whatever blue and red is, I haven't looked carefully. That's all like not healthcare primary resolution stuff, and the green stuff is otherwise.
Hmm.
Then it seems probably like you're going to get a lot of green below the line and not as much above the line. But I'm eyeballing a bunch of color bands basically. So
Well,
I'm just saying.
the issue is there's some things that are partially attributable to the healthcare system partially engages with, but non-healthcare system also partially engages with, and it's a spectrum.
Right. I'm just saying
So yeah,
I don't know how clear you want the point to be off of this. This is enough that I'm like, oh, okay, I could see that if we broke this down, we might realize a bunch of these actually go in the US direction or are neutral. But it's not obvious to
Yeah,
me right away
that
until looking at what color is what
oh,
and what kind of
sure.
what
So
the
let's
percentages
you
are.
can
Yeah,
maybe that'll be easier if you go to supplementary table 2.
sure.
Pull that up.
Contribution of 16 causes of death years to average US shortfall in life expectancy at birth, men and women, 2016.
So that summates everything, and that compares the average of those countries to the United States for the various attributable causes of death. And it shows for men and women the attributable years of life expectancy differential. And you'll notice that the big chunk of that are right at the top, which is drug overdose, firearm related. You have a little contribution for homicide, alcohol induced, motor vehicle accidents. That's a big chunk. And then you have the one this is a partial contribution to the healthcare with the healthcare system engages it, but a lot of it is just not. A lot of it is just people overeating. And I don't want to say just overeating because there's ways we could fix that, but it's not the healthcare system pre-GLP-1 anyway, or minimally far less pre-GLP-1. But circulatory diseases, 1.13 years for men, 0.99 for women. Diabetes, also obesity related. Respiratory disease, even that's obesity related. Alzheimer's disease, that to whatever degree that overlaps with vascular dementia, I mean, that's being lumped into there. That also relates to obesity. Mental and behavioral health of the nervous system, 0.21, 0.3. Suicide, we're actually a little bit better. Prenatal conditions and congenital anomalies, 0.1. For lung cancer, we're actually a little bit better. These are very minimal contributions, but then screenable, treatable cancers, which that is, of all this on the list, whether your healthcare system is failing to screen or treat cancers, is the most in the line of directly engaging with performance of healthcare system, divorced or most divorced from individual decisions, whether it be how they ate, how little or how much exercise they got, how much they smoked.
Yeah, because
At the end of the day, yeah.
I'll tell you where I'm a little hung up. Like, I take the point that there's things that the healthcare system makes a bigger difference for. And I understand that if you have a bunch of the population doing those things, it can really be that you're seeing, that the population is behaving in a particular way, not a reflection of the healthcare system when you look at something like the graph at the start of the MAHA report. So I take that point, but then
But the further point is that when you look at things that are mostly in the direction of influenced by the healthcare system and least influenced by individual choices that are just going to confound that, where the United States actually performs better.
Okay, well, let's think about that. So, like, drug overdose. So obviously people doing drugs, but do we, so maybe I'm getting hung up on something here, but like, do we know that drugs are being done at a higher rate in the US?
Well, we do have a higher cause of death by drug. I mean, we had the fentanyl issue. So whether, and by the way, whether we're doing drugs at a higher rate in the US or not is tangential to that, because we could do drugs at a higher rate, but overdose less still. Because so you can have a public policy, drug education program that would reduce that. That's not really important, but that wouldn't be part of the healthcare system. So there are ways we engage. The ways healthcare system in the United States engages with drug overdoses is getting to people who are overdosed with drugs and giving them Narcan or something. That would be how we engage with that, or whether we can perform CPR in time or whatnot, or anti-addictive medications. But for the most part, these are addictive decisions, and
okay,
these things happen outside the healthcare system.
I'm trying to think of how someone fights against this, what they have to be saying. So,
well, the point is, look at number 15. Look at what it's look at what the variable is. The variable is screenable, treatable cancers. if your attributable cause is that you fail to screen or treat cancers, like screenable, that is most in line with a direct analysis of healthcare performance.
Which puts US still, like, they're still negative numbers, but not large negative numbers, is what you want to say?
Yes, correct.
And I get
we're
that,
doing somewhat better.
and I get that you're saying that the things in the list can be tiered in terms of how to like it's a spectrum, how much healthcare is the like main vehicle to resolve this thing. It's not really just two categories. And I get that you could put these in a line, and then it's going to be the more that healthcare is a determining factor, the more the US does well on it. I take all that. I'm just trying to think about how someone might want to fight back. Like, they're going to look at something like drug overdose, and then, okay, so we have more people, not, I don't live there, but we US people, you guys, you have more people dying of drug overdose. So someone on your side will want to say, okay, well, that's like not a reflection of the healthcare system.
It's not as much of a reflection on the healthcare system
not as much. Now,
then compared to the other variables.
So what are they gonna do? They're gonna speculate that, like, actually there's more people doing drugs elsewhere. They just get, like, treated better by their health systems or something. Is that where they have to go?
No, I mean, so you're saying they would say, okay, there's more, they're just doing far more drugs in the United States, outside of the United States, but because the healthcare system is so much better, that really is what's
I'm looking
at. Done. It's possible, but the point is they would have work to do. You can come up with all these explanations. Look, you can come up. I don't think they're going to succeed, by the way, because I think the United States has a major, or at least at the time of the data, had a major drug overdose problem. So I don't think that would succeed. But the point being is that that's the work. If you can have all these ad hoc explanations, but they need to be substantiated.
Well,
the point is of this,
To be clear, I don't think the ad hoc random shit is good. The reason I kind of mention it is I think it can be good to make the barrier on, like, what you're, like, how far are you going? What exactly are you saying? And what exactly?
So I'm not saying. So let me be clear then.
Well, let me say this though. It's also about what exactly is the task of the person who wants to object to this, right? And that's kind of the question I'm getting. I'm not suggesting it's a good objection. And if the thing you have to say is, well, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so let me be clear about that. So what I'm saying is that the graph that was shown does not support its conclusion. That in and of itself is not a reason to believe that we have worse healthcare for what we spend. The reason why I've already outlined, and what you would need to do is you would need to do either a couple things. The task you would have. So where we are is we have reason to believe that we have some reason to believe, furthermore, that the United States may actually be better. But what you need to do, if you want to challenge this, is you need to do an analysis where either the same variables that are isolated to the healthcare system's engagement that are least susceptible to the effect size being manipulated by non-healthcare system related causes is actually better in other countries, or you would need to show that whatever, even if for the low contribution of healthcare related systems, whatever that small contribution is, it's so much better, it's so much greater, like your example, if they're just doing so many more drugs in Canada for whatever reason, but the healthcare management of drug use, even though it's only somewhat managed by the healthcare system, is just so much better that it still results in that effect size difference. That's the sort of analysis that needs to be done, but that's not what's being done.
Yeah, so basically your move to undermine the graph, their initial graph, is to go, okay, well, it's not obvious these things are attributable to the healthcare system. A lot of them are impacted to varying degrees by non-health system factors. So if
furthermore, there is some reason we have that suggests, if anything, the United States may be better if we did properly adjust for these things. And then it's left at that.
Yeah, so if they want to undermine you, they're gonna be doing something like going,
A robust, it's going to need to be a robust analysis. They're going to need a robust analysis of collecting this same sort of data, comparing it to the other countries, and either having some metric to tier the different healthcare system contributions and showing that despite adjusting for that, it's still better in the other countries, and substantially so, worth giving it that sort of oomph with the effect size that it initially was, or else they're going to have to moderate the effect size and moderate their tone with it, or they're going to have to develop this metric and show that, oh, actually the other countries, even when you look at these metrics where it's mostly in line with just healthcare system, the United States still underperforms. That's the task.
right, yeah, they basically need to get it into, excuse me, a configuration where it's a like with like comparison that you'll grant, and then show the
Mhm.
US still does worse. And they could do
Correct.
that by maybe they'll fight back against your claim that these things are affected by non-healthcare variables. They'll show how actually, like, all the drug overdoses, all these other countries are actually doing even more drugs than the US, and their health system just seems to mitigate that really effectively. They could start arguing like that. They could start, I guess they could try, like, well, whatever, the end
Maybe all the other countries are more obese than the
uh
US. Maybe really, like, we underestimated all the obesity in the other countries.
so at end of
And
the
maybe
day,
they're twice as fat as Americans.
so at
I'm
the
being
end,
facetious.
I
Yeah.
yeah, I know it. I mean, I guess at the end of the day, what they have to do is actually have a like with like comparison and show they can get the same result. And where we're at currently is the initial comparison has an obvious not like with like problem that would lead someone to be skeptical of it. And further, to the degree that we can form a leaning based on what we have, it seems to point in the opposite direction.
That's right.
And the reason to think it points in the opposite direction,
Because we have a variable that is pretty heavily almost defined in a way which it would be attributable to failures of the healthcare system. It's not cancer, like there's lung cancer that's listed separately. It's screenable, treatable cancers.
and that
Failure to screen or treat for cancers.
yeah, I see that. I'm just trying to follow your reasoning. So that
Well,
being,
failure to screen or treat for cancers appears to be something that is most interacted
yeah,
with
with
the
by the
healthcare
health
system.
system, not by some kind of like prevention or some
Well,
external.
that is the
Sorry, that's I
yeah,
know I didn't say that right.
yeah, that
I
is,
meant
well, that's the screening. It's
yeah,
not the prevention, it's the screening and treatment.
yeah, yeah.
It's not, yeah, not prevention. It's not deaths by preventing the
I
cancer.
just misspoke.
It's
I don't
deaths by
mean
failure to
prevention.
screen. Yeah,
I just mean by some non-medical external thing. So,
sure.
but I'm trying to understand. Maybe I'm missing the point. How
Well,
that
if it
gets
was
us to.
prevention, then you have a problem with preventing because someone could just be smoking. Maybe they're just smoking too much,
I'm
and
trying to
that's why it's
understand.
their decision.
I'm trying to understand
The
why they
point
wouldn't be positive numbers if the US was do
No, the
oh,
US is it's the opposite. Just
right. Yeah, right. Sorry, the positive ones like drug overdose
where the US,
0.62.
yeah. Where other countries are better.
Right.
Other
Oh, right.
or
Sorry.
other
So I've missed something vital here. The screenable ones are actually negative numbers. So a negative number
Yes.
is the US doing better by that much, a tenth of a
Mhm.
year or a sixth of a year for, or 0.06 of a year for women. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I do understand. I wasn't noticing the negative positive. I was just thinking of the size of the numbers going down. But yes,
Mhm.
okay. So I get it. Yeah. So when we do look at the ones that are more directly modulated by the healthcare system, the US actually has negative numbers. It actually looks like it's doing better in terms of its impact on lifespan than elsewhere. Okay, yeah. So no, I do get your point. So the overall graph is undermined by just not comparing like with like, and then we form a leaning actually in the opposite direction based on when we look at this and control for which of these things are most healthcare system modulated. The more healthcare system modulated, the better it looks, all the way to the point of actually having negative numbers on the one that you think is the most healthcare system modulated.
Correct.
Okay,
Exactly.
gotcha.
And we've outlined the task if someone wants to challenge that. Good.
Okay, so back to the MAHA
Back to the
report.
report. Yes,
Okay,
correct.
I'm back on the report. I'm at the graph again.
Okay. In 20, I'm continuing on from there. In 2023 alone, national health expenditures were projected to grow by 4.4%, outpacing real US GDP growth of just 2.5%. Yet despite ever-growing financial investment in the US healthcare system, American life expectancy lags other high-income countries. Okay, so that was addressed. Over the past century, US GDP has grown over 30,000%. Today, American farmers feed the world, American companies lead the world, and American energy powers the world. This economic growth has been a force for technology, health, and agriculture initiatives that have increased US life expectancy by more than 30 years compared to 1900. But the same forces of modernization and industrialization have also introduced threats to our health and revealed growing inefficiencies in our ability to respond to them. Over the past 2 generations, we have failed to address the alarming rise in childhood chronic disease. Federal and state policy have sometimes been guided more by corporate profit than the public interest. Many of our leading scientific and medical institutions have grown complacent, defaulting to symptom management rather than harnessing gold standard science to prevent and reverse root causes. The US food and agricultural systems have embraced ultra-processed ingredients and synthetic chemicals. Meanwhile, our healthcare system has over-medicalized children, frequently masking and compounding underlying issues. Coupled with rising screen addiction and sedentary lifestyles, these factors are converging to produce a chronically stressed, sick, and isolated generation. The crisis is undermining national resilience and competitiveness. The purpose of this report is, by the way, the purpose was supposed to be outlined in the purpose section, but anyway, is radical transparency about our current state to spur conversation about how we can build a world together where American farmers are put to the center of how we think about health. I don't know what that means. American farmers are put to the center of how we think about health. Presumably, it's like a food thing. We'll get to that. The American healthcare system thrives where disease is prevented and reversed, not just managed in a sick care system. The great American comeback energy, dominance powers, AI technology that will develop new tools and push the frontiers of science to help us better understand how to measure and reverse chronic disease. The next 10 years see a revolution in living standards and prosperity while we understand how to better manage the increased threats to our children's health that come from industrialization. America will begin reversing the childhood chronic disease crisis. So this is the crisis he's saying. There's a crisis of childhood chronic disease during this administration by getting to the truth of why we are getting sick and spurring pro-growth policies and innovations to reverse these trends. These concerning trends persist despite decades of federal investment in nutritional standards, physical activity campaigns, chemical risk assessments, clinical quality initiatives. Still, childhood chronic disease continues to rise. To make our children healthy again, we must go further. This assessment begins with a shared understanding of the crisis. The chronic disease crisis, a generation at risk. America's children are facing an unprecedented health crisis. Over 40% of the roughly 73 million children aged 0 to 17 in the United States have at least one health condition, according to the CDC, such as asthma, allergies, obesity, autoimmune disease, or behavioral
At least
disorders.
one chronic health condition.
Yes, at least one.
Chronic.
Although estimates vary depending on the... Yes, correct. Although estimates vary depending on the conditions included, all studies have shown an alarming increase over time. So we are going to go to the Discord. Chronic disease is real. So what I'm going to do here, you're going to notice you'll notice a bit of a theme. So we're going to break these alleged chronic diseases as epidemics, is how he wants to present them, into real increasing disease, like the increase in the disease is organic. That is to say, the condition that is represented is actually there in a higher prevalence over time, versus chronic disease artifactual, which is to say that there is no organic increase in the disease. However, the diagnosis is increasing for whatever reason, be it increased awareness, be it a change in the diagnostic criteria, a change in the definition. Those are all non-real or non-organic crises. Make sense? The difference?
I think so.
If I redefine obesity in terms of weighing over 20 pounds, almost all Americans are obese, right?
Mm-hmm.
Almost all the world is obese, right?
Yes.
But no one's going to say that's a crisis of obesity worldwide since I just redefined it.
But sorry, how are I get that? I agree. Yeah, but how are you distinguishing cronic? What are they
Mhm.
again? It's organic
Chronic
and
diseases that are organic increases that are chronic crises, meaning his whole point is that chronic diseases are increasing and that something needs to be done about it. So chronic diseases can be increasing due to real reasons, being the disease is actually increasing, or chronic disease can be increasing because it is diagnosed more, be it more awareness is made of it. We have better tools to screen for it and test it and make the diagnosis. We have redefined the diagnostic criteria to change the percentage of the sensitivity specificity, change the percentage of the population to allow more false positives, which would increase the number of people diagnosed with the condition, but it does not reflect in any way necessarily an increase in the actual prevalence of the disease.
okay, I see. And so when you said what were your two categories? You said organic or
Chronic
artifacts?
disease, real artifactual.
Real and
Real
artifactual.
is synonymous with organic here, and then artifactual.
Okay, and
That yeah.
artifactual is like a broad category, but that'll count things like if we just change the way we define it, now we capture more people,
Yep.
but it doesn't mean at a prior time that would have captured like less people or something like that if we applied it historically.
Right. So if it's an explanation for an increase.
Yeah.
So RF, yeah.
So if you have a case where it's like, hey, we have more of disease X now, but when you look at it, you change the criteria for having
Mm-hmm.
disease X such that
Yeah.
sure you have more if you use a different standard at T1 than T2, but if you use the same standard at both times, you won't see that increase. That's a case of something being an artifact.
That's right.
Right. So it can be that you change the criteria so more people fit under it. It
Mm-hmm.
could be what else? It could be a screening tool. You don't change the criteria, but you just screen better. That was another one, right? You
Mm-hmm.
maybe the screening tools get better, the resources to do screening. Okay, so
There's more
basically
social public awareness.
less stigma, maybe people come forward with
Yep.
it more. Okay, so basically so I get the categories. Yeah. So it's just the thing
Mm-hmm.
actually there being more of the thing at T2 than T1 in the same sense of the thing
Mm-hmm.
or
Yes.
something else. And if it's something else it's
Right.
artifactual. Yeah, okay. All right. Got
Yes.
you.
Meaning it's not a crisis to solve with an organic solution. If you think
Right.
it's either something that's not to be solved at all, or if it is to be solved, it'll be solved with an artifactual solution. Well, if you don't like the diagnostic criteria, change the diagnostic criteria. It's not something we need. We don't need to be throwing medicine at it, or taking away medicine from it.
Well, okay, I feel like that was phrased in a way that's kind of weird because I get your point, but like if you
Look, if I redefined obesity to anything over 20 pounds, do I need to throw GLP-1s
no,
at
no,
people 21 pounds? Yeah.
no, but if you redefined obesity such that it captures a bigger amount of people in a way that's actually useful, and therefore we want to give more people,
That's
yeah,
sure. That's yeah.
so I'm just thinking
That's
about that
right.
case. So that's an
Sure.
artifactual change, but the solution is an increase in the existing organic solution. As in, we see more of these.
Well,
We now are able to catch
no,
more of these people. Now we can give them the organic solution.
sure, but that's not no. But the point is that no. The point is, if it to whatever degree it's a problem, it would be a bad thing. Like if we grant that it is a problem, the problem would be an artifactual problem. If you think the artifactual thing is a good thing, it's an advantage you're capturing more people, then no, you're not going to do anything about that. If you grant that it's a problem, then it's a problem. If anything, it's a problem with the way you've defined it. Because if if you think you are overestimating it, then what accounts for your overestimation if it's not the organic disease? What accounts for your overestimation is you've erroneously defined it, then define it back
But
or
just
change the
to be
definition.
clear, you think you can have an artifactual change that results, and this being a good thing, in an increase in some
Yeah.
organic solution.
Yes, that's totally fine. Yeah. This is
Right.
only applying to the case where you think the artifactual change is due to a problem of artifact.
Okay, yeah.
If
So
it's due to a
right,
problem of
yeah. If it's a
artifact, then
right, like
fix the
you're
problem of artifact.
yeah, okay, I see. So not just any artifactual change. If you have some kind of artifactual problem, you don't want to
Yeah.
fix you. So there's a distinction between an artifactual problem and I don't even know how to do this. But the
An
point
artifactual change that we that are against our goals, an artifactual change that we view negatively and we want to fix, versus an artifactual change, but one that we've made for good reason, to capture more, for example.
right,
And
yeah.
that,
So
yeah,
an artifactual change that's desirable could lead to an increase in some organic treatment, and that'd be good. But an artifactual
sure.
change that's not desirable, you don't want to really change
You don't want
anything
to,
you're
yes,
doing. You
exactly.
just want to
You just
not
want to
create the
change the
artifact.
artifact back.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. Right. All right. So yeah, let's look at them
So
then.
yeah, broad over, yeah. So now broad overview, like the things the biggest thing I think that is organic
Should I have
in
something
terms of
open
chronic
here?
disease. You can just be the chronic disease, stay on a chronic disease crisis, a generation at risk
Okay.
for now. I'm just
Sure.
going
I
to give
have
my
the
view and
pie
we're going to go
chart.
over the evidence. Yeah,
Cool.
the pie chart's fine. So my view is that the major thing in terms of increase that is organic is obesity, overweight, obesity. There's several others, but that's the biggest thing. And organic increases in just about any other disease or almost any other disease are obesity related organic increases. The increase in obesity in the United States over time accounts for almost all, not all, but almost all of the chronic disease increases. If you fix that, you fix almost every organic increase in chronic conditions. That is my position. The things that are artifactual are going to be things like autism. My position is that there is no crisis of an increasing rate of autism. That is due to artifact. There's multiple different lines of evidence to that. There's multiple different lines of evidence for why that's an artifact and why we would not expect that to be an organic increase. Similarly, for things like ADHD, similarly, for things like, not similarly, but celiac disease is another one I think is an artifact. Other things like allergies, atopic dermatitis, I am somewhat convinced that they're real, but celiac disease, I'm not. But the biggest distinction here are going to be obesity and all the obesity related things, and then autism, neurodevelopment, neurobehavioral disorders, ADHD, in that other category are going to be generally artifactual. So obesity, cardiovascular disease, strokes, diabetes, those are all real. Those are organic. Too much ADHD, autism, those are generally in the artifactual category.
Okay.
And if
So
we,
sorry, go ahead. No, it's fine.
And if we look at the first link in the Discord, so if we go to
Okay,
Discord,
wait. So yeah, before sorry, I didn't
yeah,
realize you were going into
sure.
a section there. So I just want to have the big full
Mhm.
picture zoom out. So the broad point that they're making this is them setting up their initial like look at how bad our health is, and we're not at their
Yeah.
solutions or anything like that yet. So far there's been two
Mhm.
things. There's been the life expectancy chart which we went through, and the theme there was like comparing like with like gets rid of it. And now we're looking, this isn't so much about life expectancy. This is about now chronic disease. And
Yep.
what they want to say is like all these different chronic diseases have gone up. And you want to say, okay, sort just like with the life expectancy thing where we took the kind of the like with like cleaver to it and the problem just evaporates or points in the opposite direction. Here we're going to take the artifact or
Organic,
or
real.
right. And how's that gonna work? It's gonna
So the
be
point,
that
yeah, the point is that, well, if you're identifying a crisis you're going to offer a solution for, you, number one, if you're going to offer an organic solution for it, you best make sure that
right
the
here. Sorry. Let
crisis
me cut
is,
in. I should make myself clear so you know what you're trying to clarify for me. I
Sure.
understand that we're setting up some other kind of cleaver here, basically, and I understand
Mhm.
that one way things get cleaved out, you've made totally clear to me. It's that it's just an artifactual increase, so we even want an organic solution for that. We don't. So if their point is look at how much this chronic disease has increased, it hasn't if it's just an artifact. So
Yes.
that's how you get rid of those. But then there's also the
Yep.
cases like obesity where it
Yes.
has increased, and in those cases
In those cases, my
say what?
position, in most cases, my position is that it is real, and the not only are good solutions not really offered in this report, but the best solutions. Yes, I'm talking about GLP-1s, and we'll get to that. The best solutions are almost thrown away. Not just thrown away, they're almost kind of demonized. They're viewed as a problem.
Okay.
The paper presents the best solution as a problem.
Okay, so I understand. So this one, it's not getting sort of destroyed in the same as badly as the first one, which literally evaporates or points the other direction. This one, it's getting like mostly evaporated. Like, okay, most of this stuff is just going to be artifacts, and you'll show that.
Mm-hmm.
And then the things that aren't artifacts, you want to say, okay, point granted, that's bad, good job. And then later we'll talk about solutions, and it's going to be that, well, the solutions you pose for the things that actually are problems are just like retarded.
Yes, but just to be clear, I wouldn't even use the language point granted, because there's nothing new that this report is adding. This is not something that medical scientists have been scratching their heads for. Like,
sure.
if his point is just, hey, obesity got up. Okay, yeah, it did.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So
this,
well, someone could. So point granted. Let's just be careful. Point granted. If someone says the sky is blue, it's not really.
Yes.
Doesn't have to be interesting, but we're just in terms of pointing out what part we agree or don't agree with. You're going to say, okay, the artifact things, those aren't actually increases, so just get rid of those. Then the things that actually are increases, I'm happy to grant these represent an increase in chronic disease. So that's what you're granting. You agree with that. But then you're going to say that the solutions that they pose are just uniformly not the best. They're just better solutions.
Yes.
And probably the reason they don't want those is their ideology.
Correct. They're either they overstate the problem, and even when they don't, they may or may not, but even when they do or don't, their solutions are very either not presented, or when they are presented, they're quite poor. And some of their solutions are essentially to take the actual real solutions that will perform best off the table.
Amazing. Okay. All right. So let's start talking about these then. You wanted to go to the Discord?
So one thing I just want to, let's go to Discord. Go to the first link in chronic diseases.
How the burden of chronic disease in the US and
yes.
Okay.
Yep. And then scroll down to the graph, first graph. This is just to make a general point where the graph being many people in the US have chronic disease with obesity as the most common. So this is the age standardized share of the United States experiencing chronic diseases. And and as you can see, the chronic diseases are either obesity itself or obesity related for the vast majority of chronic conditions. So obesity, 42%, but hypertension is obesity related. Diabetes, 12.5%. Diabetes is obesity related. Even asthma, in some sense, is to a lesser degree, but asthma is obesity related. Kidney disease is. Depressive disorder is. COPD to some degree is, and cancer is as well. Not to say they're completely coextensive, but there's a huge chunk of all these other chronic diseases that are just going to fall in tandem by fixing obesity. So this is the thing that really needs to be focused on. The thing that needs to be focused on is obesity. And I think we do have a solution. This is one of the first times in ever. This is the first time in ever since we've turned the food into crack with hyperpalatable foods that we have a solution that really does work, and that is the solution that RFK wants to not only not use but discourage. So now we'll go back to Discord, and actually we'll go to the claims. So we'll go to the claims. So you'll notice that, so first claim is over 40% of the roughly 73 million children aged 0 to 17 in the United States have at least one chronic health condition, according to the CDC, such as asthma, allergies, obesity, autoimmunities, and behavioral disorders. Now, we're going to start with a little nitpick because it's not over 40% according to their source. According to their source, if you actually break down the numbers, and I've detailed that here, those who are free to take their time and walk through, I'm not going to walk through the math, but anyone can check it. If you look at their source, it actually comes down to slightly less. It's not over 40%. It's actually under 40%, a bit, 37.5%. Alternatively, their own source actually mentions that 37.5%. You didn't even have to derive that. Not that they did it correctly. So that is an error. It's not a crazy error, but that is a factually incorrect statement. They either cited that incorrectly or just made the incorrect claim, one of the two. Next claim. But yes, it's true. Like, the broad point is that we do have a lot of chronic conditions. Again, almost all obesity related, even if slightly overstated. Although estimates vary depending on conditions, included all studies show an alarming increase over time. The chronic disease crisis has far-reaching consequences. Over 75% of American youth, age 7 to 24, are ineligible for military service, primarily due to obesity.
Wait,
poor
Avi,
physical
where are
fitness,
you
and
reading from right now? Are we back in the MAHA report?
It was the same page of the MAHA report that is on the Discord channel right now.
Childhood obesity in worsening health crisis. What are we looking for right now?
So look for their citation. It's their second claim, and they have cited an increase over time. Although estimates vary depending on conditions included, all studies show.
One second. We're having a misalignment here.
Sure.
I'm trying to understand where is their second claim? You're referring to their second claim. Where is that?
Their second claim is page 9 of 73 on the MAHA report. Second sentence.
Page 9, second sentence. Over 40%. Okay, yes, we talked about that. Although estimates vary? Is that where we're at?
Although estimates vary depending on the conditions included, all studies show an alarming increase over time. Now, I went to the citation for that, which is in the Discord, where it says not adjusted for obesity. You've already seen the issue then, which is really just my response to it.
Not adjusted for obesity. Okay, all right.
Yes, correct. It's not adjusted for obesity. And if you go back to the other link, how has the burden of chronic disease in the US and peer nations changed over time?
1 second. When you say things like the other link, I'm losing you.
It's the link prior to that, right? The first link in that channel.
The first link in the channel.
The one you were on before this one. When I showed you the obesity 40-something% health system tracker.
I'm looking at right now. I see not qualified or not adjusted for obesity. That's where I'm looking in the Discord.
Now scroll all the way back up to the first link and click on that.
Oh.
The point I'm making here, So the point I'm making here is, they're showing I just pointed out the citation, and it shows all these things increasing over time. All these various chronic conditions increasing over time. But the point is they're not obesity adjusted.
Okay.
And when you scroll through this source and you look at the conditions that are less influenced by obesity, so the things that are most influenced by obesity, is going to be things like diabetes. So if you look at diabetes,
Avi, 1 second. We're fucked here. You're talking about right now in the health system tracker link?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Go to the diabetes prevalence graph.
Diabetes prevalence graph. Okay, we're looking. Okay, age stand. So this first one was chronic illness with obesity as the most common. Obesity rate is the next one.
Yeah, scroll down. It gives you over time things. Keep scrolling down.
Age standard. Oh, wait, 1 sec. Diabetes prevalence among adult population.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Got you.
Now you'll see how so obesity is going up in tandem with diabetes, which is what you would expect, because diabetes is very well tied to obesity.
Right.
However, asthma, which is not as tied to obesity, if you scroll down, it is somewhat tied to obesity, but not as strongly tied to obesity. You see that it doesn't go up to the same degree.
Um. Okay. So I'm trying to understand when I look at these. I see diabetes prevalence. I
Mhm.
see asthma, and we're looking at
You
just
see it over time.
yeah. It's and I see diabetes is going up over time, and I see
Mhm.
asthma is kind of well. It's I mean, it kind of at the
Down
end
and up,
sort
kind of,
of
and then kind of straightens out. Yeah.
yeah.
The point being is that the it's one reason to think that the there's a reason some of these chronic conditions are going up over time and some are not really going up that much over time.
Right. And you want to say they're related
The
to
re-
obesity?
yes,
Okay.
yes,
All right.
that's what I want to say. And at least one reason to think that is that the conditions that are most strongly tied to obesity tend to go up just in tandem with obesity.
Right. Okay. All
Okay,
right.
that's at least one intuition pump.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now continuing on, and we'll go back to the MAHA report.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next point is over 75 American youth aged 17 to 24 are ineligible for military service, primarily due to obesity. At least they acknowledge it's primarily due to obesity, poor physical fitness, and or mental health challenges. Here we present a brief overview of the problem, the main epidemiological trends related to childhood chronic disease in America, including obesity, diabetes, neurodevelopmental disorders, cancer, mental health, autoimmune disorders, and allergies. So the first point they're going to make is something I agree with. Childhood obesity is a worsening health crisis. This is true. Today in the US, more than 1 in 5 children over 6 years old are obese. This is a more than 270% increase compared to the 1970s, when less than 1 in 20 children over 6 were obese. Rates of severe obesity increased over 500% in the same period. The US obesity rate is on average more than double that of its G7 peers. Approximately 80% of obese teens will be obese into adulthood. Around 70% of youth with obesity already have at least one risk factor for heart disease. So, and then they show the prevalence of obesity among G7 countries. And that is actually fairly similar to what we saw on our other link. Somewhat similar, at least. It shows a increase relative to the other countries, which is true.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Diabetes is increasing among American youth. Again, also true and expected given that obesity is increasing among youth. In the 1980s, there were very few cases of type 2 diabetes in children, and incidence rates for both type 1 and type 2 diabetes have consistently increased past 2 decades. Today, over 350,000 children have been diagnosed with diabetes, 3.5 per 1,000. One study estimated 65% increase of type 1 diabetes and more than 600% increase in type 2 diabetes by 2060 if current trends continue. Prevalence of pre-diabetes, elevated blood pressure levels, but not high enough to be classified as diabetes. Blood sugar levels, but not high enough to be classified as diabetes, is more than 1 in 4 teens, having more than doubled over the past 2 decades. Again, all expected. Rates of neurodevelopmental disorders are increasing. Okay, so here is where we're going to have contention. Autism, he says, autism spectrum disorder impacts 1 in 31 children by age 8 and is estimated to be 3.4 times more common in boys than girls, according to the CDC. Rates also vary significantly by state, 9.7 per 1,000 in Texas to 5.3 per 1,000 in California. In 1960, autism occurred in less than 1 in 10,000 children. In the 1980s, autism occurred at rates 1 to 4 out of 10,000 children. Over 10% of children have been diagnosed with ADHD, with approximately 1 million more children diagnosed in 2022 compared to 2016. Rates of other neurodevelopmental disorders and learning impairments are also increasing. Over 7.5 million K-12 students receive special education services in 2023-24. And then they have the graph of autism rates amongst children by age. So this is going to be a point of contention between me and this report. Not just me, but a lot of people,
Mm-hmm.
because they are presenting a crisis of autism. You might be a little familiar why they're presenting this, or they at least may have some motivations to want to present this as an organic crisis. Any idea, Isaac?
Well, I know that there's the vaccines cause autism.
Yeah, there, yeah. Okay, wink, wink. All right. He might not. Yeah, I mean that. To be fair, they don't explicitly say that in the report. They go speculate on a whole bunch of other things, but yeah, I mean we know about the whole vaccine autism thing. But okay, so the point is that it's present autism rate in children are increasing. Now, this is where I disagree. I think diagnoses are increasing. That much I agree with, but I don't think there is a good reason to think that as an organic condition, autism rates are increasing. So if we go to chronic disease, we'll go to the first cleave point. So go to chronic diseases artifactual.
And you sure this couldn't be maybe an organic increase from like people spending a lot of time in our Discord servers?
It absolutely would be, but it would be an equivocation on autism. It would be autistic in a different sense.
Gotcha. Okay. Sorry, what do you want me to open?
Also this is also your Discord is banned for minors. So
Yeah, well, yeah, we have to think about our whole policy
by age
there.
8, by autism rates amongst children by age 8, Isaac.
Right, that's true. We aren't training them that young yet, but maybe we could do some work on that front. Okay, where do we want to go here?
Yeah. So the first, this is just go all the way to the top, chronic disease artifactual.
Mm-hmm.
So autism rates are largely a function
Wait,
of
do we finish
definition. My
everything in
position.
real? Did we look at everything?
No, we're going to go back and forth.
Oh,
We're going to hop back and forth because I'm
okay.
splitting them. We have to split in this category. It's like we're making a list, right?
Yep,
We're
gotcha.
splitting it up.
Okay.
We're reading through the MAHA report and we're splitting up the real and what's real and what's not real.
Gotcha.
Autism rates are largely a function of my position. Definitional changes, awareness, increased diagnostic tools, screening. There is no good evidence there's any real organic increase in autism over time. And I do have to give a shout out, by the way, for this graph which was put together from dataset by I do not know how to pronounce this name, Cramio on Twitter. You could find Cramio on Twitter. But this basically shows the prevalence of autism over time in the United States. Specifically, this data from the California Department of Developmental Services. And if you also look at the graph, you can see, so you see the prevalence on the y-axis, and on the x-axis you see the birth year. And you see also different points in time which reflected different diagnostic chains. So Kanner, 1943, DSM-3 in 1980, DSM-3R in 1987, and DSM-4 in 1994. So these points reflect time points at which the diagnostic criteria for autism has changed. So we'll go through how and you can see that from Kanner, we'll go in depth and we'll see this, but from 1943 to for quite some time, it was actually very hard to get an autism a diagnosis of autism. The criteria from Kanner were fairly strict. So what you had to do is you had to display a profound level of social aloofness, and you also had to exhibit some sort of repetitive movements, which were actually sort of elaborate. And the aloofness part tracked with a very, very low IQ, but the elaborate movements part that were repetitive actually tracked with a sort of higher IQ. So you had to actually split your IQ domains into a low and high. And then if you managed to get through that, you met criteria for diagnosis. So it was very hard to get a diagnosis of autism back in the day, just by diagnostic criteria. And those children, a lot of those children were actually misdiagnosed as something else. Some of those kids were diagnosed as schizophrenics, diagnosed with schizophrenia instead of autism. So there's a good case to be made that initially we were crazy underdiagnosing autism, and we were calling it something else. And the diagnostic criteria were very strict. As the diagnostic criteria have loosened over time, the rates have increased over time. So let's go through the diagnostic criteria.
And loosening might be
Counter-emphasize,
kind of weird language. It's not like we're just like trying
it's
to
not inappropriately loosening, to be clear. It doesn't mean loose doesn't mean inappropriately loosening. Okay, if the cuffs are too tight, you can appropriately loosen them without letting someone go.
Right.
So
I'm just thinking of how
exactly.
some of these crazy people will react to something like that. They'll be like, "Yeah, well,
Sure.
you like loosened, so now all these people with their
Yes.
bullshit mental illnesses
It
can
was
get diagnosed
the point.
and get
It was
free government aid."
It was right. It was inappropriate. The point of encounter, it was inappropriately strict. It was so inappropriately strict that people with real autism were just not almost never getting the diagnosis, and they were getting diagnosed with other things mistakenly, schizophrenia being one of them.
Right.
So it was inappropriately strict and appropriately loosened over time.
Mm-hmm.
With the one exception of 4 to 5. DSM 5 is not on there, but 5 actually made it a little more strict than 4. So over time, the diagnostic criteria have loosened, and the most recent change has made it more strict. So 2 essential features. One is autism or severe.
Is 5 just not?
It's not on the graph. It's not listed on the graph.
Is that because it didn't occur in that time frame, or they just didn't write it?
No. It wasn't written, and we'll go through it. We'll go through 5
because I see the dip at the end. I'm just wondering if that's 5 there.
Yeah. Well, that is a question. That is something I was wondering. I'm wondering if that's due to like COVID stuff or that's because of 5. I think that I don't. There is data that 5 has decreased the incidence of diagnoses. I don't know if there's evidence that it still has translated in the prevalence, but there definitely is evidence that's from going from 4 to 5, from DSM-4 to DSM-5, that less autism diagnoses are being made over time.
Right. Okay.
So the DSM, so Kanner had 2 criteria: autism or severe problems in social interaction and connectedness from the beginning of life, and 2, resistance to changes, instances, or unsameness. The latter term included some of the unusual stereotype movements, such as he noted, such as body rocking and hand flapping, that were sort of repetitive. And if that shifted to the DSM-3 criteria, which is diagnostic criteria for infantile autism: A, onset before 30 months of age; B, a pervasive lack of responsiveness to other people; C, gross deficits in language development; D, if speech is present, peculiar speech patterns such as immediate delayed echolalia, metaphorical language, and pronominal reversal. Pronominal reversal, by the way, it has nothing to do with like the transgender stuff. It's not like just misgendering someone with pronouns. It's actually like really like they will refer to themselves as like in third person for bizarre reasons. That has nothing to do with that. E, bizarre responses to various aspects of the environment, resistance to change, peculiar interest in attachments or animate or inanimate objects, absence of delusions, hallucinations, loosening associations, and incoherence such as schizophrenia. So this actually basically, you can see how this is in some way a response to the misdiagnosis, the miscategorizations of people with autism, because they didn't diagnose them with autism and diagnosed with schizophrenia. They actually added in a exclusion criteria. Say, listen, you can't have these schizophrenic symptoms to get this diagnosis. Like, stop that, guys. So this made it easier to be diagnosed with autism than meeting those other 2 criteria. There were 2 criteria, but they required 2 different things that tracked sort of opposite with IQ. Then the DSM-3R, they broadened the concept of autism to include children who, although socially impaired, are not pervasively unresponsive to others. I'm not going to go through the entire criteria. It's there if anyone wants to follow through it, but the general point is the same. DSM-5 actually made it a little more strict. DSM-5 reduced the autism symptoms to 2 domains from 3 domains. So it reduced it to social interaction, communication, and restrictive behavior measures into 2 domains, and it also eliminated language as diagnostic symptom and addition of hyperactivity to stimulation to list the symptoms of restricted repetitive behavior. So whereas the DSM-4 had A, B, and C, where A is qualitative impairment in reciprocated social interaction, and B as in qualitative impairment in verbal and nonverbal communication, and C as in markedly restricted repetitive repertoire of activities such as interest and manifest. So the repetitive behavior activity as a part, that verbal part was taken out and just social and repetitive behaviors remained as categories. So that took away an avenue. So some people who would have met criteria on DSM-4 do not meet criteria on DSM-5. And there is data which I have linked, so we don't need to go through everything here, but for reference, there's some data that I have linked that actually does show that this decreases the rate of autism diagnosis. So it actually has made it a little stricter. Now, what I want to get to, so what I've done so far is I have provided, number one, a counter hypothesis. And I have provided at least a mechanism, a plausible mechanistic explanation that accounts for the temporality for that hypothesis. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to provide evidence for my hypothesis. Evidence being an observation that's more expected on my hypothesis, the artifactual hypothesis, than the organic hypothesis. And this is that graph at the bottom. So do you see the prevalence graph?
Yes, I do. Yep.
Yeah. So this is a the setup here is to say, okay, if we look, if how do we test these hypotheses apart? Well, one thing we can do is we can look at the diagnoses over time. So the prevalence of how many people are diagnosed with this over time versus the prevalences of the symptoms that make up that diagnosis. Like what percentage of individuals have enough of these symptoms that would meet a cutoff for something that is appropriately tracking the appropriate use criteria for that diagnosis. So I can look at people as an analog. I can look at people who have been diagnosed with obesity, and then I can look at people. Okay, well, what is the frequency of people who just weigh this much? What's the frequency of people who weigh over 40? As the simplest example. And with that, this is an oversimplification because BMI over 30, BMI over 40, those would define different categories. But the point is that if what is happening here is that it turns out that the BMI is staying the same over time, but the rate of obesity is increasing over time, that means it's artifactual. Because if obesity is increasing over time, that means the percentage of people with BMI over 30 would be expected to increase over time. That defines obesity. But if we weigh everyone and we find that over time, every year, we weigh everyone and they're just at the same rate, but for whatever reason, they're getting diagnosed with obesity more, that's an artifact. You following?
I think so. So you have the diagnoses of the thing, you have the prevalence of the things that qualify for a diagnosis, and you want to basically see if whatever increase there is or change there is in diagnosis has a corresponding change in the things that make up the diagnosis. And in the case that there is a corresponding change, then
if there is a corresponding change, it's evidence that it's organic. If it's not, it's evidence it's artifactual.
If there is a corresponding change, but there's still an increase, right? Then right, yeah. If there's a corresponding change and there's still an increase, then it's not like the increase is just coming from categorizing differently or something like that. It's actually from there being more of the thing. Right. Yeah. And then on the other hand is just the opposite, basically. If there isn't a corresponding change, then you have reason to think that the increase is an artifact. You've just changed how you're assessing the data or something like that.
Exactly. Yeah. Or how you're going about. Yes.
Right.
So we in the United States, we don't have a centralized enough system to do that, but we can do that with other countries, Scandinavian countries. They have the registers where that can be done, and it has been done. And this is what I'm showing. So what this graph shows is a cutoff at 8.5 at a metric that is validated to track as the organic symptoms of autism, and to compare that with the diagnosis. And when you do that, whether it's on this twin study subset or whether you do that against the register of the entire population, you see the same thing. What you see is that the organic metric is essentially flat, but the rate of diagnoses go up. And so that is very strong evidence that the increase in diagnoses is artifactual. It doesn't say exactly what the artifact is or what the breakdown of the artifacts are, but it's not going to tell you whether it's a change in diagnostic criteria, although that very plausibly can be, at least to some degree, versus increased social awareness, decreased stigma, required reporting programs, funding, grants, screenings, increased technology. Any of those things can lead to an increase in diagnosis without any increase in the organic prevalence of the disease.
I understand the point, but now I'm just trying to understand how the prevalence graph conveys the point. So NPR diagnosis. Sorry?
Yeah. So the blue line is a metric that of symptomatology of autism.
Oh, and it's just consistent across the whole thing.
Yes.
Okay, right. And then diagnosis of all twins, and what is NPR?
Diagnose. Oh, that's the program. It's just in their what's it called?
Okay, no, that's fine.
So this is not not the United States. It's but it's from their it's a Scandinavian country. This is
yeah, I got you.
This is Sweden. Yeah.
And this is diagnosis of.
It's not the NPR we think of in the United States. Okay, let me put it that way. It's not it's not that NPR. Okay.
So this is diagnosis of autism that we're looking at in this chart. Yeah. Right. Mm-hmm. So we're just seeing.
Yeah. So
I don't, the cutoff for 8.5 cats, I don't know what that is, but that's
that you could do it. It didn't change if they cut it off at different points. They did sensitivity analyses, but basically that's the validated cutoff point. But although that wouldn't have mattered, the results wouldn't have changed at like 3 point something. So it's basically like you have a cutoff to optimize the sensitivity, specificity under a given ROC curve, so that it most best tracks with appropriate diagnostic criteria of like when someone should be or ought to be diagnosed with autism on whatever the criteria are.
Okay, so the cutoff. I'm just trying to make sure I understand here. The cutoff is a cutoff for when you.
It's a given severity. A given severity. It is a given severity of autism symptomatology. It's a metric. It's a construct that tracks autism severity of symptomatology of autism, and 8.5 is a given threshold of magnitude.
Okay, so
on that score.
So just to be clear, the ideal thing we'd want to see is that the diagnosis line is just the same as that line. Yes. Like if everything were working perfectly.
Yes, if that is the optimal cutoff point, yes. If that's the optimal cutoff point, sure.
Right. So obviously the important thing is just that the lines are different, the diagnosis and the symptomatology. That tells you
the slopes are
the slopes, yeah, because it's about them being related in a certain way, not necessarily about them having the same value, but yeah. Okay, so you can tell that from the fact that the slopes are different, that is a very strong reason to think that it's artifactual, because you're capturing more people without an increase in the actual things that qualify you for having autism. So I get that. I understand that's the main point. And then just
without the thing increasing, yeah.
Right, yeah. There's no increase in the actual symptoms, but you're noticing more people. But even if there was a change, it's like you said, it's about the slopes, really. Like you could have.
Yeah, the point is that the slope is flat,
Yeah, but it could not be flat,
Yeah.
and you could still show like a discordance
Yeah, then
between.
it would be
Yeah,
it would be then it would you would have to look at some sort of proportionality, like okay, what percentage? And yeah, we'll get to that. Like there are certain conditions where increases are some percentage artifactual and some percentage real. That's a thing too.
right. Okay,
And
but
this is a case that's fully expected on the fully artifactual hypothesis.
so the further point that just I'd want to make, it's like a side point, but it actually, if you're seeing the diagnosis line start lining up with the underlying symptomatology in the population line, that should actually be a good thing. Like you shouldn't look
Yeah,
at that and be
yes,
bothered
yes.
by that. You should be like,
If again, if with the caveat, if that construct is optimally tracking. So the construct of at that threshold of 8.5 is optimally tracking. Someone can make the case that like, okay, well, yes, if but it's not, that's not the optimal construct for whatever reason.
right,
Like
assuming
there's
that
some
assuming that line actually is tracking the people who really have autism,
yes.
um, then you should be happy to see the diagnosis line starting over time to get closer to it and to line up with it.
Yes,
You should be like, yay, this
correct.
is a good thing. Okay,
Yes.
yeah,
So a potentially good thing is being presented as a crisis, by the way.
right,
Just
yeah.
like a failure to identify and diagnose people that we may not have before is being presented as, well, this is just a terrible thing. We have to look at the pesticides now, and we have to look at the chemicals,
Yeah,
and we
it's
have to look at the
crazy.
vaccines, and we have to look at the yeah,
Yeah, it's actually
like
insane. Like the normal reaction here should be, and is there a reason to have any big problem with that threshold, or is that a
no,
something
no, no, no.
for,
I don't. I'm not saying. I'm qualifying this because
yeah,
I know someone who is mildly intelligent, but over assesses their intelligence, and the comments are going to start saying. So
right.
that's the reason for that, Clark. Yeah.
Yep. Okay, so yeah, basically people should be looking at this and going, "Oh, nice. It seems like we're getting better at noticing autism." But
Yeah.
instead we're getting, "Oh fuck, there's more autistic people. What have we done wrong? Let's fix all these like
Yes.
tangentially related yeah, okay. Very crazy."
Yeah.
Right.
Yes. Similarly, you can look at these mean autism symptom score. This is more the same point, and register diagnoses. And you see the same thing. And actually, like if anything, there's some data showing a little bit of a decrease in severity of autism. So autism severity has gone down over time. Autism diagnoses have increased over time.
Mhm.
Similar thing, calendar year diagnosis, prevalence of autism symptom phenotype in the yeah. So this is another similar point. Mean autism symptom score, and then age at diagnosis 1 through 6, and age diagnosis 7 through 12. That has mean autism symptom score has uh, not, it certainly has not increased. If anything, it may have slightly decreased. Okay, so that's the basic. That's the base. That is the basic point is there is a alternative hypothesis. There's a counter hypothesis, which is that it's artifactual. The hypothesis has plausible explanatory mechanisms that we already know of, which are that the diagnostic criteria have changed. It also has other plausible mechanisms that we know of, such as there have been increased advocacy, increased awareness, decreased stigma, social social work, funds, charities, funds for making all of this more aware of autism. So all of the plausible mechanisms are there, and then finally we delivered the evidence. The evidence, okay, well, here's an observation that's just wildly more expected on the hypothesis that it is in fact artifactual and not organic. And so the task for the artifactual individuals is to present their hypothesis, present why they think it's as plausible or more plausible, and then explain it. You would have to find some way of explaining the way the counter data and present your own data. That's more expected on yours or not, or some combination of those things.
Right.
But I can tell you right now, virtually all of the arguments that I've seen for the organic hypothesis is garbage. Like it's either like the most comically deranged things that just don't follow at all. Um, there's a plenty of room to go through all. We're not going to go through all. If we go through all of them, we'll spend all night doing it. But it's actually insane. So no, this is not real. This is artifactual, and it doesn't even mean that we're overdiagnosing it. It's just an artifact that is. There's no organic epidemic. It's an artifact, and it could very well just be a good thing that does not need any solution.
Right.
So.
Yep. Back to the report.
Now. Back. Okay. Yes.
ADHD time. Are we going to hit ADHD?
All right. ADA. We're gonna. Oh yeah. Actually, there was a claim on ADHD. So let's go over that. Actually, not back to the report. Back to the. Keep going. We go to ADHD in the Discord.
Wait,
Chronic disease
we're not
artifactual.
finding ADHD in the.
No, I already read it. It is in the report. It's just something I already read.
Mm-hmm.
So, over 10% of children have been diagnosed with ADHD. That was already. I read the claim about autism and the claim about ADHD. So now we're addressing both. The second claim. We addressed the first claim of autism. Now we're going to the second one.
Gotcha. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Similarly, may have noticed that there have been changes to the diagnostic criteria for ADHD over time. So, number of acquired symptoms in DSM-4, 6 or more in either inattention or hyperactive domains. DSM-5 is 6 or more in either domain only if under 17 years old, or just 5 or more in either domain if over 17 years old. Age of onset needed to be under 7 years in DSM-4. DSM-5 relaxed that less than 12 years. Again, relaxed does not mean bad. It just means just that. Impairments at onset of impairment under 7 years on DSM-4, not even required on DSM-5. Pervasiveness, evidence of impairment in 2 or more settings, evidence of impairment in 2 or more settings, that hasn't changed. One thing that has changed is autism exclusionary. So It used to be that if you had a diagnosis of autism, you couldn't get a diagnosis of ADHD. And that has changed. Now people with autism can also have ADHD. They're not mutually exclusive. And so that has changed.
And aren't they actually, in fact, like kind of correlated to some reasonable degree?
Yes.
Yeah, so you just like miss a ton of people
because
you have them excluding each other.
But that is the point. So the point is similar pattern. You're noticing a similar pattern. Counter hypothesis, plausible mechanism, and then evidence, increased recognition or overdiagnosis. So what they need, what needs to be done here. First of all, what I will say is there's no good reason to believe that for ADHD, that there's a good reason to believe that this is just an artifact as well, because there is a counter hypothesis, there's plausible mechanisms there, and we may not have the smoking gun that is has the as in, not that it's not there, but that the study hasn't directly shown this, but the smoking gun in terms of doing the same thing with autism with symptomatology versus prevalence over time. However, the burden is going to be on them to show that this is actually real rather than artifactual. So that is that's one point. Developmental disabilities. So there's a paper that I have linked for those who are interested. It discusses ADHD diagnostic trends, increased recognition, or overdiagnosis. I still don't like the term overdiagnosis. I would change that title, but because over implies that it's inappropriate. But you get the point. Artifactual. Increased trends are artifactual. They also claim that in developmental disabilities have been going up. If you look at the graph, prevalence of children, and going by their citations, prevalence of children age 3 to 17 years ever diagnosed with selected developmental disabilities by year, United States 2019-2021, any developmental disability, you'll notice a increase over those 3 years, 2019, 2020, 2021. Intellectual disability went up and down a little bit, not much. Autism spectrum disorder went up and then down, but still overall up. Other developmental delay, which by the way includes ADHD. Any developmental disability includes the ADHD. And if you look at the next graph, table 2 from the prior study of that same author, trends in prevalence of specific developmental disabilities in children aged 3 to 17 years. So if you look at trends of ADHD, did increase as expected. Autism spectrum disorder did increase as expected if they're both artifacts. But when you look at the other trends, you had brought into a category of intellectual disability that did increase. But when you look at things like other developmental delay, they actually decreased. When you look at seizures past 12 months, that decreased. Cerebral palsy decreased. Moderate to profound hearing loss decreased. And so what the case really needs to be made here is that, which hasn't been made, and there's very plausible reasons to think this is just artifactual. If this were a real epidemic, then we would need to see an analysis accounting for the changes in diagnostic criteria, or some other reason to believe it's not just mere artifact. And we would need to have an explanation for why these other conditions, why just this, and we wouldn't need it, but we would like to see some reason when we break down all of these conditions. Some are going down, some are going up. Nothing is really radically increasing spectacularly, except for the ones where we are confident we have reliable artifactual explanations for. So that's essentially the basic response to ADHD. Not the strongest smoking gun is an autism, but still something that is at least has some plausible case for it and evidence for it, which is we know the criteria have changed over time and we know there's been increased efficacy. There really isn't much of a case to make for ADHD as an organic issue being, or at least mostly an organic issue. Making sense? Following so far?
I think so. So,
Okay.
I mean, it just sounds like in the case of both ADHD and autism, we have changed various things. There's less stigma, there's programs for that, there's changes that have occurred in how the things are defined that are more permissive in the DSM, or for the most part have been more permissive in the DSM. There's just all this stuff that you would need to rule out before saying, sorry, I'll be closer to my mic, before saying that there's actually been a increase in prevalence of ADHD rather than it just being artifactual. So I think I track all that. And then it sounded like you were also saying something at the end about intellectual disability generally.
Yeah. So intellectual disability, we know that any intellectual disability has increased, but what's less clear is if any intellectual disability
has it just increased in virtue of
yes.
ADHD, autism, or similar changes, right?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah. In virtue, yeah. So what we would really want to know is, since any developmental disability includes developmental disabilities or
right, yeah,
or other developmental delays that we are confident or we have some good reason to believe are artifactual, we would want to know if any intellectual disability category is just going to be artifactual.
Right. Has there been any increase in excluding the things we know are artifactual? Has there been any increase?
Yes. And if we exclude those, we get some go up, some go down. If we lump them all together, what happens? So go to you see where table 2 is in the Discord.
Did I already have
the green one, the green table. Yeah, it's a green one. Table 2, trends and prevalence of the specific developmental disabilities.
Yep.
Right. If you look at the percent changes, the biggest one is the biggest percent change, 122.3%, is from autism, which we have the strongest case,
right,
for it being artifactual. So the biggest point going up is the strongest. Happens to be the strongest point.
Sorry, I kind of get the numbers by looking at them. So yeah, the biggest one's autism. ADHD is another that cuts in that direction. So just leaving those two out, what do we end up with? Well, we got some that are down 9.7 on cerebral palsy, 9.4 on profound hearing loss.
Minus 9.7,
Sorry,
by the way, because it's
minus on both those. Yep.
yeah,
We
that's
got
good, by the way.
we
It's
have
decreasing, if
we
anything.
have some right. We have some stuttering and stammering going up a bit. But then we have stuff like intellectual disability, which I don't know, does that include
Which that went up 25. Well, that no. Well, that no, it wouldn't include it because it would be higher.
Okay, so that
that
doesn't include ADHD or autism. Any developmental
yeah,
disability does. But so anyway,
yes,
the point is the things other than ADHD and autism are just a mixed bag. Negative 9.7, negative 9.4,
yes,
20.8, or
yes,
25.8, negative 6, 4, negative 12. Yeah, it's like where did
yeah,
the trend go? So it was all coming
right.
from autism, which we have a bunch of reason to think is just an artifact. And even if you don't go as far
Hmm.
as to say, okay, we have a bunch of reason, which it seems we do, it's still minimally the other side has a bunch of work to do to establish that it's not an artifact.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, for
They
autism, an enormous amount of work. For autism is like the hardest thing to show organic. The the evidence is so overwhelmingly in favor of being an artifact or a combination of different artifacts.
right.
ADHD, strong case that it's also an artifact. Not as like ironclad as autism, but still a very strong case. A lot of work ahead for the organic side there.
Right.
But yeah, it's telling that the biggest chunk of that increase is just being driven by
Autism,
autism ADHD,
which is just a proxy for
which
vaccines.
yeah, there you go.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So I get it. I get the table too. This makes sense. Should we continue?
Sure. All right. So we're going to go to cancer. So go back to the MAHA report.
Okay. I am back on the MAHA report.
Okay. And then we're going down to childhood cancer. Yeah.
Right.
Childhood cancer incidence has risen over 40% since 1975. Okay. And then they have the cancer rates. So now we're going to, again, there's a reason I put an artifactual. So, counter hypothesis. We have been getting better at screening for cancers. We've developed all sorts of tests. Imaging has improved.
Yeah, it
We've
doesn't
been able
sound
to detect it
suspicious.
earlier. Yes.
Like, I think if you just ask the average layperson with no context, do you think we've gotten better at detecting cancer in the last like decade or something? I suspect most people would just intuitively say yes, just based on a general understanding that technology gets better.
Yes. And the other point, so okay, plausible mechanisms. Yes, we've gotten better in all various aspects of technology, whether that be blood tests or whether that be imaging. Technology has just improved. We've learned more. We've standardized various tests in response to certain symptoms. So we've gotten better at diagnosing and picking up cancers, including in children. And here is the big point. The response here, if you look at the response, the age-adjusted death rate is actually lower than the percent increase in incidence. So now we'll go into how much that makes a difference in terms of the artifactual versus organic hypothesis. I think it does. But if you pull that up, you can see that. Do you see those two, the blue line and the red line?
Yeah, I'm still trying to
Yeah.
get my head around this. I
Okay.
see that it's
So
mortality per 100,000 and it's over years, and I see
Yep.
both are trending down. So
blue is the all-cause mortality, and cancer is the red one.
yeah, so we're
Cancer is
seeing
the red. Yeah.
less people dying from cancer and heart disease as we go forward into the future. Not
Yes.
exactly surprising. Like,
and this is
no
in childhood
shit.
cancer, by the way. Yes.
Right.
So in childhood cancer, we have a lower all-cause mortality over time by 53%.
Mm-hmm.
So the incidence is true. The incidence has gone up by 40%. The deaths have gone down by 53%. And so it is possible. The counter, if they want to give a explanation, they can say, well, we just got better at treating. And we got so much better at treating that really the toxins in the environment, they really are like bumping up cancer so much for the kids. And the reason they're just not really dying as much anymore from cancer is just because we got better treating it. Now it's possible. Certainly possible. However, that is a lot of work to substantiate. The much more plausible explanation is just we got better at both. We got
Right.
better at screening and we got better at treating. And ultimately, what's happening is good.
Right.
What's happening is over time, less kids are dying from cancer.
Right.
Which, by the way, is kids being treated and being screened appropriately for cancer is something that the healthcare system very directly interacts with, that you can measure its effectiveness for.
Right.
And we're doing really well.
Right. Yeah, we had positive numbers on screening in that other graph. I forget what that was for. Was that for cancer or just with some kinds of
cancer? Yes, screening for cancer and treatment of cancer.
Right. So it seems like the US is actually doing better than
yes. And this is just one thing that relates to that. It's just for US kids, the rates of cancer deaths for US kids have radically dropped over time.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so RFK is presenting this as like there's just this epidemic of cancers everywhere in our kids.
When in fact
risen by
there's
over 40%.
less cancer. Yeah. Well,
there may very well be less. There may very well be less cancer. When in fact, there's very good reasons to believe that's just artifactual. There may very well be less cancer, and to whatever degree there is cancer, we're better at curing it. We're better at treating it. We're better at preventing deaths from it.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. This is the next graph is the same. It's just a Kaplan. It's a survival curve.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So the right data spans 1975 to 2019. Diagnostic techniques, treatment methods, and record keeping practices evolved. These, and oh, by the way, yes. So this is the citation for the MAHA report, to cite their claims. And by the way, in the peer review, if you actually read the peer review, the authors agreed with this assessment. They said, so one of the reviewers in this paper that the MAHA report cited said the data spans from 1975 to 2019, during which diagnostic techniques, treatment methods, and record-keeping practices evolved. These changes could impact the continuity and comparability of the data. And the authors themselves have said, we fully agree that changes in medical technology, treatment methods, and record-keeping practices over a 45-year span could influence our results. And then they say, unfortunately, SEER database had no details regarding modalities of diagnosis and treatment. Collectively, these changes impacted the trends of cancer diagnosis and treatment. Our analysis is admittedly deficient due to the lack of data. We highlighted this in our limitations. We face limitations in accessing crucial information about treatment modalities, such as specific chemotherapy regimens, surgical approaches, due to the rest of our study. This limited our ability to thoroughly analyze the impact of different treatments on survival outcomes. Okay, so these authors are agreeing that with that peer reviewer, they're saying, okay, yes, that is an issue. We can't just conclude that rates of that rates are organic of what we're looking at. We cannot just conclude the age standardized incidence rates are going to be non-artifactual.
Right.
But that's not what's presented in the MAHA report.
No, they don't.
The MAHA report doesn't go through any of this. They just say, cancer, our kids, cancer, it's going up.
Right.
And it just leaves the reader to just be like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Maybe there is something to do with that, to not using toothpaste, fluoride. Maybe we gotta, all that stuff.
Right. Yeah. It's just like, I guess maybe conspiracy isn't well, maybe they think there's a conspiracy behind it, but it's just like super epistemically trash viewpoint being pushed to like the general population and policy being made because of it. It was just insane.
Yeah.
It was pretty wild.
Let's go back to
this incompetent that it's like, oh yeah, it's not good.
Oh boy.
Okay, I'm
I
back
know
to the
everyone's
report.
gonna say
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah, all
Yeah,
right, all right.
everyone's gonna say what?
No, you voted for this. You voted it's just the most. I'm not going to deal with that right now, but I think that's a really incredibly silly thing to say. But we'll get into why that is, but
Yep.
not now. Well, the point is we're going to stay on topic. Okay.
Sure.
American youth face a mental health crisis. Okay. Teenage depression rates. Okay, this I actually do think is probably real, somewhat to do with COVID. And you can even see that as a spike in 2021. But so American youth face a teenage mental health crisis. Teenage depression rates nearly doubled 2019, with more than 1 in 4 teenage girls in 2022 reporting a major depressive episode in the past year. 3 million high school students seriously considered suicide in 2023. Suicide deaths among 10 and 24-year-olds increased by 62% from 2007 to 2021, and suicide is now the second leading cause of death in teens aged 15 to 19. The prevalence of diagnosed anxiety increased by 61% among adolescents between 2016 and 2023. Of over 57% of girls reported feeling hopeless, while sadness and hopelessness, while suicidal ideation in teenage girls has surged by 60% in 2010. And then they show the graph.
Mm-hmm.
This I don't even this I don't even really disagree with. I do think that there is increase in depression and anxiety that is not artifactual. There are some reasons for that we can get into. I don't think, just to be clear, I don't think RFKJR offers any good solutions to problems we already know of. And I think there's a good case to make that is, again, not to the same degree as obesity, because obesity is the strongest case, but his offered solutions actually present viable solutions as problems. So there's that. But we're still in the process of siphoning what's real from what's not real. So
Right.
that siphon is real. Okay. Allergies are widespread and autoimmune disorders are rising. Today, over 1 in 4 American children suffered from allergies, including seasonal allergies, eczema, and food allergies. Eczema, atopic dermatitis, and skin allergies increased from 7.4% of children under 18 from 1997 to 1999 to 12.7% from 2016 to 2018. Between 1997 and 2018, childhood food allergy prevalence rose 88%. Celiac disease rates have increased fivefold in American children since 1980. Rates of IBD and Crohn's disease have increased by 25% last decade. Okay, so let's break each one down. So some of these I think are real, and some of these I think are artifactual. I think, and we'll get into why, I think eczema, skin allergy, and food allergies are real. I think they are not purely artifactual. I think there is a real organic increase in those conditions. Celiac disease, I'm not convinced that is real. I think that is artifactual, and let's go through why.
Mm-hmm.
So, food allergies.
Right now we want
Uh,
chronic disease. Here, let's just see which ones we've
yeah,
gotten to. So I see in chronic disease wait, did we finish off real?
artifactual.
Real had food
So,
allergies and
yeah,
COVID.
so I'll briefly say why I think the why I think the why I think eczema is real. I'm eczema and skin allergies mostly real. The reason we can actually go there. We have the reason for that is the number of it's not just the diagnoses have increased, but the number of hospitalizations for it have increased. So similarly, you notice a similar theme. Like you can set up a construct, one construct. So you set up a analysis of the diagnoses, so incidence. In fact, let's go to the link. I'll just do you see the link where the JAD link in chronic
Yep.
disease real?
Mm-hmm. It is
So pull that
opening.
up. Yeah, and do you see the table with the years?
1 sec. It's got cookies. Table with years. Yep, got it.
Yeah. Now, you'll notice that it's not just the point in the table is to recognize that over time, the incidence per 100,000 of hospitalizations with diagnoses of atopic dermatitis and hospitalizations of so a diagnosis with atopic dermatitis as a disease have increased over time. So to some degree, that provides some evidence that this may very well be real. Do you understand why that provides some evidence, or
why it provides evidence?
Mhm.
Let me just make sure I understand. So which are you suggesting there's a specific row to that's
incidence per 100%. Sorry, incidence per 100,000 incidents.
incidence
Right
per,
under
yes,
it's the
right
second
there.
one. It's the
Incidence
second
per
row.
100,000. So I see those going up.
Yeah. Right.
And
So that's not the incidence of diagnoses.
no, that's people.
That's hospitalized
Okay, so
with any diagnosis of AD. It's
hospitalizations going up. I mean, it just seems like
yeah.
unless there's some countervailing thing, you would think hospitalizations mean there's more of the thing. Like if you heard way more people got hospitalized for the flu, you would think there's like more flu going around or something. And again, unless there's
Right.
some countervailing reason.
Well, the countervailing reason is that the principal hospitalizations with the principal diagnosis of AD didn't really change. However, so you might say, okay, well, hospitalizations with people with diagnosis of AD went up, but that could just be artifactual because maybe there's just more people getting hospitalized and they're just carrying the artifactual AD. So there's reasons to go against that, which is that it happens to be just the diagnosis code punched in by people doing the admissions aren't going to be principal diagnosis of atopic dermatitis for the admission. They'll usually do it as something else, some kind of complication of the atopic dermatitis, like cellulitis. There's an explanation for that. And the proportion of atopic dermatitis patients with Charleston comorbidity index is over 3. That increased from 10.5 in 1998 to 27.8 in 2018. So it is really that severity of eczema is increasing over time, and it's not just diagnosis of eczema increasing over time. So remember the metric, just like we had that metric before with autism, that cutoff at 8.5, remember that?
Yes.
A similar metric here, the Charleston Comorbidity Index score over 3. That has increased as well from 10.5 in 1998 to 27.8 in 2018. So unlike autism, where that construct of severity, the construct of severity was flat in autism. In this case, the construct of severity is not flat. In fact, it over doubled.
Yeah, where are you
between
seeing
1998 and 2018? The text above the graph.
The text above the graph.
The proportion. Do you see where it says the proportion of AD in patients with Charleston
Yeah,
comorbidity index?
yeah, above 3 increased from. Okay, so right, so there's an increase in severity over that time and an increase in hospitalizations over that time.
Right.
And
so that's the key point. So that's a reason to believe that this is real. That it is not just artifactual.
Right, that the hospitalization rate increased in tandem with an increase in how severe the problem is.
Yeah, so right, it's what it's saying is that if there is an organic issue that is increasing over time. So if eczema is increasing over time, you expect there to be a higher number of people with severe eczema over time. All else equal.
Yeah.
If it's just due to artifactual, you would expect the opposite, if anything. You would expect if we're just getting better at diagnosing it, even if it's more hidden for whatever reason, being less severe, we'd see it less severe, or at minimum, not more severe.
Right. Also, seeing it be more severe indicates there's probably more of it because a higher portion of people are ending up with it severe.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Right. Okay.
So that is why I think that is real.
So
I think that, or at least not fully artifactual.
Okay, so we're not talking about solutions yet, but here's another one where we say, okay, all right, it does seem like this is going up. So this is under real. So we have
Yeah.
I guess that's all dealing with allergic and autoimmune conditions. So I guess what now we're at food allergies and is that
Celiac. Oh yeah, yeah.
is that
Similar. Well,
is that
similar.
spelt wrong or is that
Similar things.
actually how you spell celiac? Does an O in it?
Oh, so it depends on. Okay. Well, hold on. Celiac disease. Well, let me see
I
where
don't
we
care.
are.
I was just wondering if I was always wrong about how to
Chronic
spell it.
diseases. Oh, you mean like the is like the British way of spelling it? Like
Yeah, I just don't. I've just never seen an O. I wasn't sure if it was a typo. It doesn't matter though. You don't have to look.
celiac. Yeah, celiac. It could be celiac disease or COELI. It depends on estrogen or oestrogen, like depending on which. I don't care.
Okay.
Whatever, but that's not the important thing.
All right. Well, let's hit these two then. Food allergies and celiac. So mostly
Okay.
real,
So
partly
food. Well, food allergies. Yeah, I've looked. I've been looking into. So food allergies. I don't. Yeah. Hold on. So chronic disease is real. Yes. Food allergies probably is mostly real. I don't have the for similar reasons. I haven't. I don't appear to have the link over there. But food allergies are well. Why I think it is because they're tied to eczema, which is a weak reason to think it's real. But here are the reasons to think it's not just artifactual. The reason to think it's just artifactual is because eczema is increasing and it's tied to food allergies. The reason to think it's partially artifactual is that we've gotten better at doing testing for it. We've gotten better at patch testing, namely patch testing and prick testing, and we even have blood tests for it now. So partially, my verdict is partially artifactual, but real, but also real.
okay. And then I noticed
And
that
then
yeah, we have celiac in
celiac.
both.
So
There's yeah.
celiac disease mostly artifactual, and I have a link that says chronic disease artifactual. So this is artifactual.
So why do we even reference celiac disease in real at all?
It's because it's just near the next thing that follows from that claim.
Okay, but you actually think
It's
it's
just the order.
fully artificial though.
Almost fully artifactual.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Probably
So
almost. Yeah. Exactly.
I'm looking at your section in artifactual about celiac now.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's go to their the first link, which is what they cited.
Mm-hmm. Okay, got it open. The changing face of childhood celiac disease in
Yes.
North America.
Changing face. Yes. Incidence and clinical presentation of celiac disease in patients under 18 years of age. Okay, so what they're saying is the median age what they're saying in terms of the rates, the incidence of celiac disease increased from 2 cases per 100,000 children, the pre-testing group, to 7.3 cases per 100,000 children. The frequency of celiac disease presentations decreased from the frequency of classic celiac disease presentations, which is a more severe form of presentation, actually decreased from 67% to 19%. But the incidence of celiac disease did not differ. In the incidence of classic celiac disease did not differ. In the testing group, 13 previously unrecognized clinical presentations were observed in 98 children, including 35 with family history, 18% with abdominal pain, and 14 with type 1 diabetes. The frequency of Marsh 3C lesions, which is something that happens in celiac disease, Marsh 3 relates to the atrophy of the intestinal villus, and 3C refers to complete loss of the villi. And that is as a severity that decreased from 64% of the pre-testing group to 44% of the testing group. So what you're having here is your incidence of diagnosis is increasing, but what's happening to your severity? Metrics for severity are decreasing. Okay. Which basically just says if you're looking for it, and look, we've gotten better tests for it. We've evolved our technology into not just for blood testing. Now we have ways of diagnosing on skin biopsy, by the way.
Right. It's the opposite of what was the one that we just looked at where
yes, the one that we looked at where the severity of eczema increases with
yeah. So
with eczema.
It's literally the opposite. Yeah. It's not even just that it doesn't change. It actually the amount of seriousness goes down. So you'd actually predict using the same method of screening to see a decrease in people who qualify, but you see an increase. So, like, if the underlying things that qualify you for celiac are actually going down, but diagnoses are going up, that's like even more reason to think that it's artificial or artifactual.
Artifactual, yeah.
Yeah.
And then also there's another paper that I linked, um, which shows this. You see this graph, diarrhea without weight loss and diarrhea with weight loss. It's just another severity metric.
I'm just looking. We're looking for increasing incidence of celiac disease in a North American population.
Oh no, no,
Oh
no!
yeah,
It's in the
diarrhea
disc.
without.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, I clicked that.
yeah,
It's in that article. Yeah. So I see. Yeah, diarrhea without weight loss, diarrhea with
yeah.
weight loss. Yeah.
So another way of just splitting out the constructs, just say, okay, well, here's a more severe is diarrhea, a presentation of celiac disease, diarrhea with weight loss, less severe diarrhea without weight loss. So you'll see diarrhea without weight loss has gone up, diarrhea with weight loss, the more severe form has gone down. So what's happening is more people are being caught in a less severe state, which indicates it's artifactual.
Right. That's better testing.
That is better. That
It's
is
like
better
if you
testing.
heard you're like catching more patients in like stage 1 cancer or something. You'd be like, oh, we're testing better.
Right. Yes, exactly. And everyone would look at this as just a good thing. And
Yeah, that's a funny
that would be
point.
just
Yeah.
like
Yeah, it'd be like, oh, great,
just like,
we're like
oh,
getting better at finding celiac. But no, the
right.
RFK
But
people are going to
but
go, celiac is a
yes, yeah,
pervasive,
like
increasing problem, clearly.
right. And just imagine, like, in any normal world, just reflect on this craziness. Like we would just be like, oh, this is like a success of the healthcare system. And it's been turned into something that we need the Secretary of Health and to just put out this monstrosity
Right.
to get to the bottom
Right.
of this.
There's nothing to get to the bottom of.
There's nothing here.
Yeah.
There's nothing here. We're
Well,
just doing a good job.
this is why I kind of
Just,
make these points here or there about just how the average person, I suspect, would hear these things, because I think that it's all framing. Like, I think if you said to the average person, like, we're now catching like 30% more cancer in stage 1 than we did in like 98, I think the average person would just unequivocally be like, oh, that's good. Like, obviously there's more, but you could frame that same thing in a weird way and be like, 30% more people have cancer now is are being, I don't fucking know, but you could phrase it to make it sound like
yeah.
there's more people with cancer rather than that we're doing a better job at finding cancer. And it actually, it's like you don't have to change the language a lot to do it, and you create a polar opposite message using basically the same data. So it's like super dangerously misleading. This is the kind of thing that you can't
Yes.
trust people to tease apart, like, at all. So it's good to make the video.
Exactly. And yeah. So now let's go back to the report. We'll go on. We'll go to the report. What's driving the increase in childhood chronic disease? So he's presented the chronic disease. Okay. So just to he's presented the chronic diseases. A whole bunch of them are not even real increases. They're not crises at all.
Right.
A whole bunch of, in fact, not only are they not real, if anything, they're just evidence of things already going well, like us just improving.
Right. And there's one or two things like obesity, which we'll come around to, because those
Yes.
we actually agree are increasing, actually agree are bad, and also
Yes.
think your solutions are just trash.
Right.
Right.
Right. So
Okay.
the things that we're going to be that are worth talking about is really the things that are the most what we already knew that was worth talking about, which is the actual organic increases. So what is driving the increase in childhood chronic disease? According to the MAHA report, rising rates of childhood chronic disease are likely being driven by a combination of factors, and it is so predictable which ones they say. He says the food the children are eating, the
The
chemicals,
chemicals.
the chemicals,
Of course.
the chemicals they're exposed to, and of course the medications they're taking.
Right.
We're just pumping them full of meds,
Right.
and various changes to the lifestyle and behavior, particularly those related to physical activity, sleep, and use of technology. That part actually is not
Yeah.
too unreasonable. That part is reasonable. the report focuses on the four major drivers. These four major drivers.
Yeah. So
Um,
yeah, so I mean, we'll get into all this and which are reasonable and
yeah.
which aren't, and that aligns with my basic non-health person intuitions about this. Like, yeah, people are being less active, and that probably is going to have some bad health consequences. But just important framing, so we keep the big picture in mind. We're now moving from talking about the like the datum that's on the table, like here's all the bad things, to why are all the bad things happening. But it's just worth remembering as we get into why are all the bad things happening that like we don't grant half the stuff they're trying to account for here actually requires any kind of accounting or is a bad thing in the first place,
Right.
because it's
That's
accounting for the
exactly
chronic diseases, a bunch of which we don't actually agree are genuinely increasing.
right. Accounting for not things that aren't real,
So
things
it's
that
just
aren't
you
in the
just
way they say they are.
you just got to flag for people, like, although we're into this section, that you have to remember that we already cleared out like a huge chunk of the bullshit that this section is actually trying to account for.
Yeah. Exactly. And so let's go through and we'll flag that. So the very predictable explanations, the food. American food system is safe but could be healthier. Most American children's diets are dominated by ultra-processed foods. High in added sugars, chemical additives, and saturated fats. By the way, very interesting. Saturated fats are being presented here in a negative connotation. Just noting that for all the ketos out there who worship RFK, while lacking sufficient intakes of fruits and vegetables. This modern diet has been linked to a range of chronic diseases, including obesity, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and certain cancers. The excessive consumption of ultra-processed food has led to a depletion in essential micronutrients and dietary fiber, while increasing the consumption of sugars and carbohydrates, which negatively affect overall health. Nearly 70% of American child's calories today come from ultra-processed foods, increased from 100 years ago, many of which are designed to override satiety mechanisms and increase caloric intake. This is the most important thing about ultra-processed food that he's actually said, and then ignores it.
Yeah,
Ultra-processed foods make up 50%.
designed to is also kind of weird conspiracy language. Like, what companies
But
are
he's but
intentionally
yeah,
designing
but
foods
he's
to make
right.
us.
Yes. Yes, and he's right about that conspiracy. This is the one conspiracy he's right about. Well, maybe not the one, but he's right. Well, I'm going to say a few words on this. Ultra-processed make up 50% of the diets of pregnant and postmortem mothers. Okay. Let me just say my position for ultra-processed foods. Ultra-processed foods, as a heuristic, is okay. As a heuristic, as a general rule of thumb to avoid ultra-processed food, is okay. Ultra-processed food does not equal bad. Ultra-processed food does not equal unhealthy. In fact, there is a diet, which I can show, that is completely structured. It's been published in literature. You can just have a diet that's essentially like 90% ultra-processed foods. That's way healthier than just about basically what every average person is eating. And it's actually just a pretty healthy diet. Usually, ultra-processed food is not going to give you that. However, like just to give some examples, protein powder is classified as an ultra-processed food by the standard classification mechanisms, NOVA or whatever. That is not an unhealthy food. Protein powder, if anything, is generally recognized as a very healthy food, and it is ultra-processed. So, as a heuristic, but there are better heuristics when it comes to obesity. The better heuristic is the one thing that he just mentioned, many of which are designed to override satiety mechanism and increase caloric intake. That is what a hyperpalatable food is. There's a lot of research on hyperpalatable foods. They are not necessarily ultra-processed foods, although many are. And the ones that are a subset of ultra-processed foods. Typically, some combination of salt, sugar, and fat are added. And those combinations, salt, sugar, and fat, salt and sugar, salt and fat, sugar and fat, are the sorts of things that are added to make a food hyperpalatable. for whatever reason, overrides satiety mechanisms and leads to increased caloric intake.
The only thing that's weird to
So,
me is the
mhm.
designed to, because you're saying that they have that effect,
Yes,
but do you think that
yes, I think food company, yes, I think the food industry, or at least part of it, wants that because it sells product.
yeah, I guess I'm not really sure about this. I don't know if
I think
they
they want, and by the way, let me just frame that a little more innocuously, and I think you'll just easily accept it. Do people want to make their foods super tasty? Like really, really, really tasty? Well, if
yes,
you're
but
making foods, yeah, yes,
yeah,
of
but I'm
course.
just okay, the thing I'm confused on is like tasty, is that the same as override satiety mechanism? Like cuz I'm
Hyper
picturing what I'm
palatable.
picturing
Yeah.
here, like I agree that there's an incentive to
Mhm.
make the tastiest food and the food that keeps people coming back. And
So it
I
may be
agree
designed to
that
be something that's coextensive. Sure. Maybe it's designed to be something that's just
yeah, because
coextensive with that.
I just don't know
Like
how
super
many
tasty.
like
Yeah.
because the thing is what I picture is
Hmm.
the RFK would think something like that the CEO of the evil company tells their
Right.
food department to make our Kit Kats fill people up less so they'll eat more of them or something. And I'm pretty skeptical
I
of
see. Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
I could see how like market forces just push in that kind of direction naturally,
Right.
or
Right.
I could
Right.
see how they're making things that are
Yeah.
extremely healthy and that turns out being coextensive with things that are
Hmm.
uh
Yes,
low
I think it's more
satiety.
it minimum it's a coextensive. Yes. Okay, so I see what you're saying. Yeah, so it's a coextensive thing. RFK would have to show more evidence if he wants to make a further claim that
Yeah,
it's
that it's
not
basically a
just
conspiracy.
coextensive.
And the thing is,
Yes.
I wouldn't be surprised if there is some level of that. Like I don't
Yes,
doubt that there's ever
exactly.
been a food company that's been like, you got to make these things smaller, make them less filling, make it so, like I mean, sure, I'm sure there's fucking people like that, but to attribute like a big part of a trend in like low satiety foods to like deliberate intention to like manipulate consumers or something like that, I'm kind of like, okay. Like I think you can have all of the same outcomes without assuming the intention. I'd agree there's probably some amount of that intention, but if you want to say that's significant, you have some empirical work there. So I just kind of flag that so
Right,
it's
there's
clear
further
you're
work that
not,
needs to be done.
yeah, because you're not
Exactly.
saying those kind of things. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. uh yeah, so my position then is the focus should be not necessarily on ultra processed foods. It should be on a subset of ultra processed foods, which are hyperpalatable or otherwise shown to be
Right.
harmful.
Because you're saying ultra
And
processed foods are at
yeah,
best a poor proxy for the thing you actually care about
yes,
here.
yes. And there are hyperpalatable foods that are actually not ultra processed. A you can take a steak and put salt and sugar on it and add a little fat and make that hyperpalatable. There's ways you can do things that wouldn't be classified necessarily as an ultra processed food, but that will induce overeating.
Right. Hmm.
Okay. And so okay, so whatever degree that, just as a general theme, if I am signing off on claims that okay, well the ultra processed foods are linked to this, linked to that, linked to obesity, just keep in the back of your mind I'm doing that as a heuristic, and I don't agree that that's the best heuristic.
Right.
So, yes, ultra processed foods are responsible for all these problems as a heuristic, as a loose proxy to what we really should be focusing on, not which is not ultra processed foods per se.
Right.
American children exposure to environmental chemicals. Okay, so the second thing he wants to knock on is the chemicals. The cumulative load of thousands of synthetic chemicals that our children are exposed to through the food they eat, the water they drink, the air they breathe, may pose risks to the long-term health, including neurodevelopmental and endocrine effects. Over 40 chemicals are registered for use in the United States.
40,000.
Pesticides. Chemicals. 40,000 chemicals are registered. Terrible. Oh my God. Pesticides, the microplastics, the dioxins are commonly found in the blood and urine of American children and pregnant women, some at alarming levels. Children are particularly vulnerable to chemicals during critical stages of development, in utero, infancy, early childhood, and puberty. Research suggests that for some chemicals, this cumulative load of exposure may be driving higher rates of chronic childhood diseases. Yet, current risk assessment methods may not allow us to fully understand how these exposures affect human health. Okay. My position on this is that the evidence for this, for almost all of this, is wholly unpersuasive and very weak, and we will get into that. American children's pervasive technology use over the past this, I think, is reasonable. This is where we get started not so insane. Over the past 4 decades, American children have transitioned from an active, play-based childhood to a sedentary, technology-driven lifestyle, contributing to declines in physical and mental health. Specifically, these declines have been driven by increases in screen time, reduced physical activity, psychosocial stressors like loneliness, chronic stress, and sleep deprivation. Teens average nearly 9 hours of non-school screen time each day. Over 70% of children and 85% of teens fail to meet the 2024 federal guideline of 60 minutes of daily moderate to vigorous physical activity. Nearly 80% of U.S. high school students do not sleep at least 8 hours per night, up from 69% in 2009. Persistent sadness and hopelessness among U.S. high school students surged between 2011 to 2021 from 28% to 42%. Female students and suicidal ideation, with female students' suicidal ideation rising from 58% from 19% to 30%. In 2024, 73% of 12 and 24-year-olds reported loneliness, with 5% of young men having no close friendship. By the way, you'll notice that how this is a minor point, but this is very loose. Like this whole thing is supposed to just be about children, and he'll just bring on, okay, and you'll just get these points about adults. Like,
yeah.
Not to say it's not completely relevant. You can make some sort of inference. Well, if this is happening with, relatively young adults, maybe it's also happening with children, but it's like very sloppy. Like that inference isn't built. Like he's just shifting around.
Right.
From adult to child to adult to child.
No, I got you. Yeah, I mean, if it's about children, it should be about children. It shouldn't be like hopping to random other groups.
Right.
Also,
unless you have a good inference, unless you're establishing an inference to that group, and you're making that clear. But yeah, you were saying also.
Oh yeah. Since when has there been a 60-minute daily activity federal guideline?
50. It's. There's all sorts of guidelines. There's dietary guidelines. It's not like a law or anything.
No, of course.
Oh, you're asking like what's the
I just thought that number,
like so when was that?
I thought that number was lower. I thought that the
No, it's for 6 to 17-year-olds. For that age group, there is a guideline for 60 minutes of activity. But first of all, let me just say this, and this is a point I'm going to make broadly about guidelines. Almost no one has ever read guidelines. Like just right now, this is something you haven't read. I know you're Canadian, but most Americans probably don't know this either. Like they don't know what the dietary guidelines say. They don't, even though the dietary guidelines will be demonized for causing all the problems that RFK will do that. But even though no one has read them, and even though no one knows about them, and even though no one follows them, which also is in this report. So yeah, none of that really like makes sense as a causal entity, as far as like its direct relationship to consumer habits or even knowledge. So yeah, so where were we? Okay, so yeah, so these points are I largely grant. The points about mental health I largely grant, although as we will see in terms of the solutions, I don't grant his solutions, and I think they're harmful. American, and here is the fourth part. American children are highly medicated, and it's not working. The health system has aggressively responded to these increases in childhood chronic disease with increase in the rates of pharmaceutical drugs and pharmaceutical drug prescriptions, which may cause further harm to the health of American children when used inappropriately. Stimulant prescriptions for ADHD in the U.S. increased from 250 percent from 2006 to 2016, despite evidence that they did not improve outcomes long term. Okay. This is the first, well, not the first, but this is a egregious misrepresentation of a very important study on treatment for ADHD. So let's go through that. So let's just make sure what the claim is here. Let's be very clear about it. He is claiming that stimulant prescriptions for ADHD in the US increased. That's true, they did. Despite evidence that they did not improve outcomes in the long term. That part right there.
Right.
They did not improve outcomes in the long term. Citation 64. And so let's go through that. Driving. Okay. Driving outcomes.
Driving
okay.
outcomes. Childhood
Yep.
chronic disease.
Yes. Yeah, driving outcomes. Yeah. And try that driving. That's the that's just me screenshotting it. Go to the paper, the Jensen paper, and this is I screenshotted that too, the graphs.
Jensen paper right there. Boom. Okay, got it. It's open.
Okay. So this group, this represents these three different graphs: ADHD symptoms, oppositional defiant disorder symptoms, and the Columbia Impairment Scale. These are constructs to look at treatment effect. And there are different groups. There's a medication group designated MED, behavioral group, combination of medication management, and CC, which is usual community care. The trial, this is a trial. The trial started time point 0, where the symptoms were basically the same between groups. And as you'll see, the groups that improved were the medication group.
Wait, should I be looking at the table right now? Where should I be looking?
The table, yeah. The graphs.
Table 1? Wait, you wanted me to find graphs or
figure 1. Oh, I see. You're looking at the actual study, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. So then let's go to the graphs.
ADHD symptoms, ODD symptoms, Columbia Impairment Scale.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yes. So you see how in the beginning, so as you expect, in the beginning of the trial, month 0, the symptomatology was roughly similar between groups. And the treatment effect becomes pronounced at month 14. So and which groups did better? It's the medication group and the combination group. The combination group did a little bit slightly better than the medication group, but most of the benefit is being driven by the medication. The behavioral therapy alone group did not do that. Was very minimally contributory to a treatment effect, and usual community care was also, in terms of treatment effect, minimally contributory. And what they want to say is, now if you look at over time, 14 months, 24 months, 36 months, you see how they converge again, right?
Yeah.
And so what they want, what the MAHA report here is saying is that, well, look, the symptoms converged over time between these these 4 groups. So therefore, the medication treatment for ADHD doesn't work in the long term. There's a little detail they left out here, which is that by month 14, all these different groups were allowed to do anything. They were allowed to converge on their medication usage. Those assigned to behavior alone were allowed to use medication more frequently. And in fact, if we look at the key kicker over here, which is table 2. You see table 2?
I'm looking. I see figure 2.
No, table 2.
Table 2.
In fact, I've screenshotted it in the Discord if you need it.
We could do it like that. Sure. Let me open that. Table 2. Okay, I've got table 2.
Yes. So you see the different treatment groups: combination, medical management, behavioral, community care. Look at the percentage of medication use for those different groups. So by month 14, baseline of 14,
they're
the
all like
medication and
converging
combination,
on how much
they're
medication they're using,
converging.
and the people who are taking a
Exactly.
lot are getting a bit less benefit, and the people who are taking less are getting a bit more benefit. That's even what it looked
Yes.
like in the chart. Yeah.
Yes.
That's
So what
funny.
you see is that the medication use convergence is paralleling the treatment effect convergence.
Right. Yeah, okay, I see.
And
They're
so of
they're just
course
looking
you're
at
not
it.
seeing yeah.
Yeah, they're looking at it like you treated everyone the same way all the way through, and then they just all got the same result in the end, so the medication did nothing. And it's like, no, well, you had them clearly separated in how much medication they're taking. They were significantly diverged, and then to the degree that they reconverged, it seems to be modulated by their increases or decreases in medication taking.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
So this is pretty brutal. Yeah.
And if you actually and just to put the cherry on top of how ridiculous this is, the next screenshot I have is a quote from the authors in terms of clinical implications of how you should interpret their study.
Intensive
It
medication
says,
management may only make a persistent long term difference if it is continued with the same intensity as during the MTA's initial 14-month period.
right. And in fact, if you just the whole paragraph, it would be incorrect to conclude from these results that treatment makes no difference or is not worth pursuing. Indeed, the 14th intensive medication algorithm, the 14-month intensive medication algorithm yielded significant advantages for the first 24 months, although not to 36 months. And therefore, intensive medication management may only make persistent long-term difference if it's continued with the same intensity during the MTA's initial 14-month period. So they're not saying that it doesn't work long-term. What they're saying is that presumably it would work long-term. Every reason to think it would work long-term, but you actually have to still take the medication.
Right. Yes.
You can't like drop your medication usage to the rates at which it doesn't work.
Yeah, this seems pretty basic. Yep.
And so just imagine, I just make the point again. Imagine how embarrassing this is. Like in any other context, if just to reach out to any RFK supporter, like if this were something Biden released, you would be losing your shit right now. And you would rightfully be calling him Sleepy Joe or demented or all those things. Like he can't even read a citation. Like, yes. Like this is a government report that has completely botched the representation of this study in the exact opposite way that the inference points to, by what the authors are saying, by what the medication convergence matching the treatment convergence. The conclusion is it works. You take it and it works. If you stop taking it, yeah, no shit, it doesn't work. What is presented is that don't work long term. A complete misrepresentation of the study. I don't know if it's because they didn't read it. I don't know if it's because they had an AI looking at it or writing it for them. But this is really bad. Like this is gross incompetence.
Yeah,
And
it
it's
is pretty
embarrassing.
shameful. Yeah, I would be embarrassed if this were my country.
Okay. Yeah, you would, eh?
Yeah,
All right.
I would.
Mhm.
Okay.
All right. So that's the response to the ADHD. So ADHD.
Mhm.
Antidepressant prescription rates in teens increased 14-fold between 1987 and 2024, even though a systematic overview shows that psychotherapy is just as effective as drugs in the short term and potentially more effective in the long term. Okay. You got to do more work than that, RFK. You pointing out that there is a therapy that is as effective does not mean that's mutually exclusive. If psychotherapy were mutually exclusive to medication, he'd have a point. Well, you can choose this one or that one, and this one is just as good, if not better. Fine, that's a reasonable case. There may be other reasons why, but that's not the case. Just pointing out that antidepressant prescription rates have increased is not a point of overtreatment. You acknowledge that depression has increased. So I know you want to make the point about, oh, we're not tackling the root cause. Okay, but that doesn't preclude treatment. Even if you want to say there's some sort of root cause making people depressed, that doesn't mean there's overtreatment. And the mere fact that psychotherapy is a thing in no way means that treatment is off the medication as a treatment is off the table.
Yeah.
Especially if depression rates genuinely are increasing.
It's a false dichotomy.
So some of these you'll notice that it's not going to be an in-depth empirical debunk. It's just going to be just basic fill. It's just going to be like, which is also, by the way, which also is embarrassing. Like that, a lot of these points are just dismissed on basic fill. But all right. Antipsychotic prescriptions for children increased 8-fold between 1995 and 2005, with most of these medications prescribed for conditions not approved by the FDA for use in children. Okay. Let's just clear one thing up. Off-label use, okay? Off-label use does not and never has meant inappropriate use. Off-label use means that for whatever reason, there wasn't enough money behind funding the trials required to get the FDA to approve it for that condition. And there's many reasons why that can happen. A drug goes generic, and a pharma company is not going to make money off getting getting that indication because people already have a generic formulation that they could just prescribe off-label. That doesn't mean that the case is not there to prescribe it. So just pointing out that they're off-label doesn't mean that they're erroneous. Now, he did cite to a study that said that also broke down the evidence in support for the off-label indication of those atypical antipsychotic prescriptions. However, when you looked at how that evidence was defined, it was just defined in terms of the type of evidence that would get FDA approval in the fucking first place. So the definition was, we characterize the evidence based off-label use as either moderate or strong or uncertain. Moderate or strong includes only those indications where drug dex efficacy was effective or favors efficacy, the strength of evidence rating indicated by randomized controlled trial derived evidence, A or B. And the strength of recommendation rating was recommended for most patients or recommended for some patients. All indications not meeting those criteria were classified as having uncertain evidence. So just to be clear, robust, well-controlled prospective cohort studies, you can have as many of them as you want, all showing the same thing: high treatment effect size for a given exposure outcome relationship, for a given medication, for a given condition. And that study would classify it, that the MAHA report cited, that study would classify it as uncertain, meaning that they were saying they're prescribing these atypical antipsychotics based on off-label based on uncertain evidence. But uncertain evidence is just being defined in terms of very much what made the prescription off-label in the first place. So that's not adding anything. It's just saying it's not backed up by RCTs. Well, yeah, we know it's not backed up by RCTs. It probably would be FDA approved if it was backed up by RCTs. You following?
I'm not sure. Antipsychotic prescriptions for
Sure.
children increase. Also, it's partially that my brain is dying a bit. I'm gonna slug through a chunk more of this because it's fun, but I can also tell sometimes, not of my own volition, that my brain is slowing down a bit, and it's probably just because I did programming all day before this. So antipsychotic prescriptions for children increased 8-fold between 1995 and 2005, with most of these medications prescribed for conditions not approved by the FDA for use in children. So I didn't get your whole point. I was understanding in broad strokes that you were basically trying to say they had, like, as a philosophy point, like, you've defined this thing at the outset such that you get some fuckery, but I didn't track the fuckery though.
We'll go point by point. So the first point he makes, first point that's made in the MAHA report, is there's an increasing prescription rate of atypical antipsychotics. Now, the obvious point back is, okay, that doesn't mean overtreatment.
Wait, one
But
sec. When you
now
say
it's
that,
saying,
sorry, when you say that, I see most of these medications prescribed are not approved by the FDA for use in children. How
now
do you
that's
get?
that's a different, that's the point. Yeah. So that point is that it's not FDA approved. It's off-label use.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that is being said as a force, as a there's the unspoken, the not directly said force behind it is that we shouldn't be prescribing it. Doctors shouldn't be prescribing atypical antipsychotics off-label, or even potentially anything off-label.
I'm confused about the atypical stuff. Antipsychotics prescription.
Oh, there's typical. It's just the categorization. It doesn't mean anything beyond like so like atypical antipsychotics.
It's okay if that's not the important point. Like I guess
Right.
most of the medications prescribed are not
Like
FDA.
SSRIs are not atypical antipsychotics. Like you're thinking about things like risperidone, olanzapine, quetiapine, ziprasidone, aripiprazole.
Well, one second.
Like
one second.
those are
with most of these medications prescribed for children not approved by the FDA for use in children.
Mm-hmm.
So the complaint is like we're giving kids lots of stuff that's not actually approved by our health check for being given to kids. So what are you saying? Are you saying the thing that qualifies it as atypical in the first place is not being
no,
FDA
no, we're not there yet. Atypical is just a different classification of types of antipsychotics. So it's something like other than, think about it like other than, it's not just other than SSRIs, but like it's no, sorry, not like it's not Haldol. Sorry, they're antipsychotics, not antidepressants. So it's just a classification within different types of antipsychotics.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the important point here.
Mm-hmm.
That is a real classification. He's not saying that to draw any like connotation to that. So, like, there's a real classification of atypical antipsychotics. So yeah, like Abilify.
No, I'm not trying to focus on that. I'm just saying that like you asked if I understood your point, and I was saying the part I don't understand is the philosophy point. I see that.
All right, sure. Let me get there. I will get there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
So first he says that, okay, well, the implication here is that not that they're atypical, that's just a real classification. You can replace it with any medication, but that they're not FDA approved. So they're off-label prescription. What does that mean? Off-label prescription means it's being prescribed for an indication in which there isn't FDA approval for that indication. So what are the things required to get FDA approval? In pharma, randomized controlled trials, demonstrating efficacy and safety.
Right.
So the first point in response to that, okay, well, yes, they're off-label, but that doesn't mean they're erroneous. It could just very well be that there's good data, there's robust prospective clinical cohorts out there that show that they clearly work to a good epistemic degree, and indeed in your clinical practice, it's working very well. And the only reason it's not FDA approved that is because no one paid to have the trials, because it's like a generic medication or something. Or no one had paid to have the trial for an additional indication. It's just the trial hasn't been done.
Okay.
Or no one paid for it because they thought it wasn't profitable. So for people who have that other indication are just too small of a population. So all that's being shown there. So the point is that you're not showing that the prescription is erroneous. So the issue is in the citation that the MAHA report cited, it didn't just include whether it was on-label or off-label. It also assigned an evidence categorization to it. And it found that a whole bunch of them were based off uncertain evidence instead of moderate or strong evidence. You following so far?
Yeah, you're saying that the MAHA report cited a study, and that study classified these things not just in terms of off or on label, but in terms of like how strong the evidence is supporting their usage?
Yes. Yes. So it wasn't just as off-label; it was off-label, and it classified them as uncertain evidence in
Okay.
supporting it.
Mm-hmm.
Now that would respond, in theory, that would respond to the objection. I would say, because the objection is off-label prescription doesn't mean erroneous prescription, and they would say, "Oh, yes, it does here because it's also based on poor evidence."
Right.
So that would respond. However, when you look on how uncertain evidence was defined,
It was defined in terms of
it was
off-label.
defined in terms of not having no. It was, well, indirectly. It was defined in terms of not having RCTs to back it up. RCTs to back it up are the sorts of studies you would have to get FDA approval in the first place.
Oh, I'm
The
missing the
reason,
links there.
okay,
W-
so the point is that not only is it not FDA approved,
Mm-hmm.
it's not FDA approved, and it's based on uncertain evidence.
Okay.
However, when you look at what uncertain evidence means, how uncertain evidence is defined, it's defined in terms of not being supported by randomized controlled trials. But randomized controlled trials are the requirement to get FDA approval.
I don't get what I'm
So,
not getting
so,
it. Yeah. I like why is that a
so,
problem?
so, so the problem is it's not adding. Well, let's just make it more simple. Let's say uncertain evidence just meant analytically not FDA approved.
Okay.
So then you'd be saying not only is it not FDA approved, it's also not FDA approved.
Right. Yeah, that would be worthless.
Yes. Now, if you said something that was not purely like exactly analytically like that, but was extremely close to that, it also would be pretty worthless.
Yeah, you ask what not
So,
FDA
yeah.
approved means, and
Mhm.
they tell you
And what
weak
FDA
evidence,
approved
but
means, it just
weak
means,
evidence is just not RCTs, which is just the criteria
yeah,
for getting
yes,
FDA approved in the first
yes,
place. So,
right.
although yeah, so you're not really adding you're not at well, I guess
You're
you're not
not
adding
adding much by
anything
saying that. Yeah,
because
yeah,
because
exactly.
because the only additional thing you don't get anything if you already know that whatever these studies are they didn't
Yes,
have RCTs behind them, and then you say, well, they don't have like property X, like property X is like being low evidence, something like that. They don't have property X, but property X, all that qualifies you for property X is like having RCTs. It's just restating what's already known, and the objection was to what's already known.
right.
Right, the objection was to
Yes. The objection was to what's already known, that it's not FDA approved. Well, you can still be in the
yeah, you can
clear
still be FDA
prescribing something not FDA
approved,
approved,
but yeah, right, you can
not approved.
it can
Yeah,
right, it can be FDA unapproved and still a good thing to prescribe. Well,
right.
no, it's not, because if it's not just not FDA approved, it's also low quality evidence. Okay, but wait, what's low quality evidence mean? Oh, it just means it's not done with RCTs. Wait, but that didn't add anything in
Yes,
addition to it not being FDA approved,
exactly.
and
Now you got it.
that was what my initial response was to.
Yes,
Yeah, okay,
now
I
you got
see.
it.
Yeah, so that's not very helpful, yeah.
That's, yes, that's the issue.
Right.
So that does not respond. So nothing in that study addresses a very basic thing, which is that we prescribe off-label medications all the time for good reason.
Right.
And the fact that the study classified uncertain evidence does not add any information to that. Because it's just defining uncertain evidence in terms of the sort of evidence that would commonly result or qualify to result in FDA approval.
This is why it's good to know some philosophy also, because stuff like this is not just about knowing about health and guidelines and stuff like that. It's about being able to look at how words are defined and notice when using further words creates a circle or fails to add further information, and to understand what the criteria is for the thing that they're saying to actually be a response to something else. Like, oh, it has to minimally add some information. Does this do that? No, because when we do this term substitution, we see that, right? That stuff is all kind of, I would sooner call that philosophy, that kind of skill
Yes.
set. So yeah, that's why people who are doing health stuff who watch this, because you get a lot of people who are really just on the health side, who
Yeah.
don't know much about, like, they wouldn't know like formal logic, or they wouldn't know much about philosophy. This is why you have to hit this kind of minimal level of competence, because if you just min max domain knowledge, stuff like this, and there's things that are more philosophy heavy than this that are problems, some of them with particularly insane people. Like, if a lot of like crazy health, like diet lunatic people, it just comes down to they have a demented epistemology, and you have to know how to actually attack them at the level of epistemology, because they aren't actually making errors at the level of applied science. They're just starting from different epistemic norms than you. So yeah, this this is all just kind of like that. That's a more crazy case where it takes more of the philosophy to deal with it. But yeah, this is why you have to have the dual skill set, because if you just min max the domain knowledge, you won't be very good at catching things like this, or like the more extreme philosophy heavy problems that people make.
Right.
And that doesn't mean you have to become
Well,
great at both, but it's kind of this like minimal level of competence with philosophy that will just help you so massively with your like primary focus.
yeah, fully agreed. Back to the MAHA report. We'll go off this next claim.
Mm-hmm.
Studies find more than 35%, equivalent to more than 15 million prescriptions of childhood antibiotics, are unnecessary, and that infants exposed to antibiotics in the first 2 years of life are more likely to develop asthma, allergic rhinitis, atopic dermatitis, celiac disease, obesity, and ADHD. Now, let's address those two claims. Studies find that, remember, let's be clear about what the claim is. Studies find more than 35% of childhood antibiotics are unnecessary. They have a citation for that. This is their citation. Go to the Discord. Driving outcomes.
Driving outcomes. What am I looking for here? 35% of childhood antibiotics are unnecessary.
I made it easy. I got the screenshot of the relevant part right there.
Okay, this is the one I'm looking for.
Mean annual antibiotic prescription rates.
Yep, gotcha. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, what they've done is they've estimated the mean annual rates of antibiotic prescriptions and the estimated appropriate annual rate of antibiotic prescriptions, and the potential reduction in annual antibiotic prescription rates is just what is inappropriate that we have room to improve on. So for all 0 to 19, that entire category, all acute respiratory conditions, it's 34%. Now, that's acute respiratory infection. That's not all antibiotics for all children. Antibiotics for all children, the total, that total figure is 29%. The correct figure is actually 29%. I don't know how they got some figure over 35%. They said over 35%. If anyone is following and wants to look at that study and figure that mystery out themselves, they can. I tried to regenerate that number. There's no figure that tracks the inappropriate use of antibiotics to be just over 35 or moderately over 35. It's either like really, really high or just lower than 35. But that's not even the correct figure, lower than 35. The total is 29. It's lower than 30. So it's not above 35. It's actually lower than 30. I don't know how they got that number or again, it's just, and how much of a difference does that make that they said it was over 35 and really it was below 30? Maybe, I don't know, but the point is just that it's again and again, there's when they say over this number, when I look into the source, it's not over that number, it's lower.
Right. Just sloppy.
It's just really, and I can't re-engineer how they're getting their information. Again, I don't know if it's an LLM. I don't know if this is if maybe the LLMs are better at just grabbing direct numbers, but when you have to do a little bit of calculation, like divide this by that and then do one minus, and you just ask it in one question without walking its hand through it, maybe that makes errors more likely. So I don't know. I don't know where the error came from, but that's just the wrong figure.
Mm-hmm.
And the wrong figure is against their agenda. Like the correct figure. The correct figure is against their agenda.
Right.
Like they're overstating.
Yeah, they made an error in the direction. Their errors are consistently in the direction that helps them.
Yes. Right. Exactly. Which is another thing to note. Now, as far as the second claim, and by the way, this isn't a novel thing. Like, empiric antibiotic treatment has a value, and yes, it's acknowledged that some of those, like an accepted cost of that is sometimes you're going to end up treating someone with symptoms of an infection that doesn't actually have an infection that's going to respond to that treatment. That's a risk we are aware of. It's a risk we know of. That's a balancing act. There's antibiotic stewardship programs. Like we're fully aware of this, and I'm not sure I don't think he really does much of any good solutions that we already have antibiotic stewardship program. But anyway, the second claim is, and that infants exposed to antibiotics in the first 2 years of life are more likely to develop asthma, allergic rhinitis, atopic dermatitis, celiac disease, obesity, and ADHD.
Are we still looking at this same table?
No.
Table 4? No.
It's just the second claim. It's the second claim. So he's saying we're prescribing antibiotics to kids, and we shouldn't be doing it. We're prescribing, at least at the rates that we are. Like we're prescribing because we're over prescribing antibiotics 35%, meaning that appropriate use of antibiotic prescription, 35% or over, is inappropriate. He got the number wrong. It's actually less than 30%. But his further point is that this is harmful. Why is it harmful? Because if we do that early in life, he's saying it's associated with various chronic conditions. Those being asthma, allergic rhinitis, atopic dermatitis, celiac disease, obesity, and ADHD. Here is the big thing that those studies don't adjust for, which is the infection itself. So, yes, it's true that there's an association between antibiotic usage early in life and chronic conditions. It may very well also be true, and I think it is true. In fact, there's background knowledge to suggest it is true, that getting infected, by which antibiotics is the treatment, early in life is also associated with chronic conditions. You following?
Getting infected is also associated with chronic conditions. Yes. But
yes. And so the mirror. So correlation, not causation, is the first basic point. It's like, here's a major thing that needs to be adjusted for. Because, okay, let's say that, just to give an obvious example, let's say you heard of polio, Isaac.
Yes.
Polio virus. Paralyzes people, right?
Yes.
Now let's say people were treating polio with antibiotics. And then someone like RFK comes along and says, wow, if you treat these people with antibiotics, they get paralyzed. So that shows.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it shows that the antibiotics are paralyzing. But, well, no, not necessarily. It could very well be the reason you're giving them antibiotics, which, by the way, you wouldn't give antibiotics for someone with polio. It's a virus. But even if you were, like,
yeah, you need
doesn't
to know
mean you were paralyzing them by doing it.
Counterfactual. Maybe they would have become paralyzed sooner if you didn't give them the antibiotics as a treatment. Right. Yeah.
So that's the biggest thing. Not adjusting for antibiotic indications themselves for which the antibiotics are treating may cause the chronic health outcomes.
Okay.
Also,
wait,
by the way,
let me just make sure I understand how this responds. So studies find more than 35%, equivalent to more than 50 million prescriptions of childhood antibiotics, are unnecessary, and that infants exposed to antibiotics in the first 2 years of life are more likely to develop all of this shit. So your response to this is what exactly?
So my response to that is that association is unadjusted for the most obvious confounder, the most obvious potential confounder, which is the indication for which the antibiotics are given in the first place.
I'm not sure I'm following.
So basically it's the equivalent of saying, so this point is the equivalent of saying, we've just imagine the polio case. Let's say we overprescribed antibiotics because we were erroneously treating people with polio. right?
Mm-hmm.
And then we noticed that those people we were treating were getting paralyzed. And then he says, oh, you treated them with antibiotics. You're paralyzing them with antibiotics.
Okay, but just how are you getting to that's what's happening from this
So
quote here?
that's what's happening from here, because he's saying that there's an is a further quote. It's not the quote in the Discord. It's the quote in the MAHA report that says, and infants exposed to antibiotics in the first 2 years of life are more likely to develop asthma, allergic rhinitis,
Oh, no,
atopic
no, no.
dermatitis,
Sorry,
celiac disease.
I understand that point.
Yeah.
Infants exposed to antibiotics, like you, I mean,
Yes.
they have to say something like that. They actually need to know what happens in the counterfactual. I get
Yes,
that, of
exactly.
course.
Correct. And now
And
when we look at studies that do try to do that, we get far lower. We get a mix. First of all, we get a mix. We get a mix of. We found a statistically significant event, but it was like very low in terms of impact, and it's doubtful if it's even clinically meaningful, or they're just not statistically significant at all. Like it's not. We really couldn't even show much of anything. And I've linked 3 studies that do that here. We don't have to go through every
okay, and
single
just
one of them,
before
but
going
that's
through those, just the first part
yeah,
about the prescriptions being
yeah.
unnecessary, you don't grant that they're unnecessary, like, because the second part is saying and
Yeah, so
harmful,
there's always
but
going to be
yeah,
yes, yeah. So the first part I don't grant I don't grant it on several layers. The first layer is that the number is wrong. That's a very big
right.
first layer.
The
It's just
number's
like,
wrong.
okay,
Problem one.
the number is wrong. Problem 1. Problem 2, there's always going to be some percent of what is being classified as this unnecessary. Meaning like the infection wasn't there for which the antibiotic would treat.
Right, there's like a natural human error rate that's going to be the same with like all sorts of
Not even due
yeah.
to error, like not even due to error, due to justified intent.
Yeah, we want
So,
like
for example,
false.
yeah,
We don't want false. We will take a false positive sooner and give someone antibiotics they
yes,
don't need rather than like not treat someone and
then
let
a
them.
false negative and let them die.
Right. So it's not okay, so not error, but it's like anticipated overshooting because that kind of overshooting is worse or is better than undershooting.
Yes, yes. So, like, someone shows up with
Right.
signs
So
of
it's like when people
sepsis,
say
yeah,
the employment rate or the unemployment rate is so and so, and with the assumption that the right employment rate is 0. It's like, wait,
yeah,
I'm not sure if that's the case. Like there's some amount of people who are like who for whatever reason they ought not be employed currently. Like they don't want to be, or they're
right.
doing something else. So, I mean, I guess some I guess maybe a slight symmetry breaker is that in the perfect world you wouldn't have any false positives or false negatives. But
Right.
when you just account for the
Now,
basic
what's his? Yeah, yeah.
when you
Like,
account for the basic
eh,
synthetic fact of like you're gonna have to actually
mhm.
deal with that because we're in reality, then I mean you're still talking clearly about
Right, but again,
something
like, so
that
if look, there's that point goes nowhere. Like, if the point is that, yeah, in the perfect world, but what's your prescription then to make this world the perfect world? Great, we all have that prescription. We all want this to be the perfect world. Like, it's we live in a world right now where if someone we don't know, we're not omnipotent. Someone comes in presenting with signs and symptoms of sepsis. We have empiric antibiotic therapy for a reason, even
right.
though it is possible that they're presenting with signs and symptoms of sepsis without a bacterial cause that would be treated for
Well,
the
yeah.
antibiotic empiric therapy.
So it's a difference than the unemployment one, because in the unemployment one, the theoretical best world still has some people who aren't employed.
Right,
In this
exactly,
case,
exactly.
the theoretical best world doesn't have anyone getting treated
Yes,
unnecessarily or
it's
not being treated who needs it. But we could talk instead of about the best world, we could talk about the best prescription that we can currently give or something like that.
yes,
And
sure.
in that case, you're going to get, yeah, the best prescription we can currently give generates some amount of false negatives or false, yeah,
Yes. Well, yeah.
false, false positives.
Well,
Sorry.
treated, yeah,
The
treated positives. Yeah, they're treated, but they
case
didn't
where we
have
say
the
you are
disease. Yeah,
positive for needing the
yeah, false
treatment and we
positive,
treat where they shouldn't. Yeah.
false positive.
It's always,
The
it can
word,
be, yeah.
yeah, it's more impactful to it's less damaging to have a false positive and treat it than to have a false negative, in the sense that patient is septic, you don't treat it.
So
Like,
important
the
point
patient does
being
have this presentation.
under our best model, right? Under the best prescriptions we can generate right now, our best attempt to move to the best possible world, of no false positives and no false negatives, we currently expect to have some amount of false positives. So seeing a number that differs from 0 there is not an indication that we're doing anything wrong.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
okay, I get that.
And
Yeah.
yeah. And by the way, if he wants to make a case that the ideal number is lower, then he has to make that case. Then
Right.
if you want to
Yeah,
solve
you don't get
medicine,
to just
solve
it's so stupid how people do this. You don't get to just point at a number and be like, this number seems not good. It's like, wait, no, but what is the number that it should be? Like, firstly, you have to establish that, and then also why is it deviating for that, and is it for some kind of bad reason? And people just don't do that. They
yeah.
just say this number no look good, me no like.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of what's being, yeah, that's, I hate to say it, it's kind of what this is relying on, but like, yeah, it's just, that's what this will talk to. Like, it's like this bad. And you'll see this report is full of this. Like, instead of like saying it increased this fold, they'll say it increased like, say like, oh, 500,000% or something. Like just big numbers, like make the number big
Oh,
in this MAHA report. It's like, it increased by this, by this, by this, like, oh, like, and just people aren't thinking like, oh, okay, well, that could just either
yeah,
be nothing or be good. It
right.
might be good.
There's
Like,
so many things that undermine this. Like, you have to know, you have to have some idea how the actual numbers are working. Like a 500,000% increase in something that has like a absolutely minimal prevalence rate. It's like, wait, is that actually, what's that actually amount to, and what are we trading for that? Are you saying that you care more about reducing this like barely existent problem because it's a big amplification of some even less existent problem than getting whatever gains we're getting from the thing generating the small increase? Like, you can't get just freaked out by like relative numbers, like, oh, this is bigger than that number, or even by absolute numbers without any context. Like, you just need to actually understand where the numbers are coming from, and have yeah, I mean, you just need to have basic understanding of what's actually going on with the numbers. So I think a takeaway here is actually not to be freaked out by big numbers.
right.
As sad as that is, it's not a
Well,
very
this is,
intellectual takeaway, but it's like probably important.
the other takeaway is that those big number things are being used to get you to have a conclusion like that.
Yeah,
It's like, it's
you're
almost,
a shitty little pawn.
yeah. And yeah, don't like so that's okay. So back to where we were. Yeah, the antibiotic thing, you got the wrong number, by the way. And even if with the correct number, it's not clear why that is, like, what the different prescription would be. Um, if you had a perfect knowledge, sure, you can get that number down to 0. The reason it's not 0 is because we don't have perfect knowledge and we don't have a perfect risk benefit analysis. We recognize it's generally more harmful to erroneously not treat these infections than to erroneously treat a non-infection.
Right. Mm-hmm.
To whatever, and to whatever risks you can point, and that's what he is doing in the next claim. He's pointing to risks of erroneously treating a non-infection. Stack that up against the risk of erroneously not treating those infections.
Right. Yeah, it's like with COVID, like, oh, the myocardiac uh,
Oh yeah,
danger,
myocarditis, COVID,
yeah,
myocarditis.
right. And
Yeah,
then you're like, okay, but the risk of not taking it is like a higher risk of erectile dysfunction. Like,
so, or something like, or whatever other, like, in certain age groups, it'd be like, you know, like for especially the higher age groups, it's like risk of, risk of death
right,
is in the elderly or something like. And the only thing they will focus on is the, for whatever reason, myocarditis is just the only thing that matters now. It's funny because at first it was the only thing that matters was death. Like, and then we'd point out, okay, well, other things matter other than death. And then it's like, okay, other things matter other than death, but for some reason it's only myocarditis. It's like,
yeah, it's
all
convenient
right,
which things matter other than death. It's
yeah,
convenient which errors they make in reading their numbers. There's a lot of convenient mistakes.
yeah.
Though I'm actually
Okay, so
skeptical about
mhm.
how much of it is actually planned conspiratorial stuff. I suspect that it's more like either like using LLMs poorly or just being like ideologues and not having any basic rigor. I sort of suspect it's more stuff like that than that there's a huge conspiracy behind the MAHA report. Like, does
I
it
don't
this
think it's
strike
as
you
a
more as
no. I don't think it's
incompetence,
a
presumably, right?
no. I don't. Yeah, no. Just to be clear, I'm not saying this is a conspiracy. I'm not saying they're saying, oh, we're putting in big numbers because we're going to trick the public. I just think that's the way these people talk.
Yes, yeah,
Like
exactly.
this way, like these people talk in terms of like that. That's just the way in the language game. That's what the people who won't evaluate this just respond to.
Right.
That's what
Yeah.
lay public responds to. It's like they respond to big numbers. And so
Yep.
like, oh, I know they respond to that. I'm going to say that. I'm going to say the big number.
Yeah.
Okay, so then he's going to say it's harmful. The response to that, again, anyone people can check through these sources. So we don't have data adjusting for the infections on all of these outcomes. For the outcomes that we do have some data on, you see a consistent finding of the magnitude of the relationship becomes quite trivial. It becomes very low, if that's even significant.
Should I
In two of the
be
studies I've seen,
yeah, should I be opening any of these here?
no, you can. We're it's going to take, in the interest of time. I'm just making. I'll go through them really quickly. One has a significant group, but the odds ratio is only 1.12. The next one was not statistically significant. The second one wasn't significant, and says the relationship of asthma and antibiotics in the court appears to be an artifact of the strong correlation between the number of physician visits or illness with both antibiotic use and asthma. Because the point is very basic. I don't have. It's not like anything spectacular that we're going to see, and anyone can look in and check those findings.
Okay.
In the third study, our findings suggest the effect of antibiotics in respiratory disease may be due to confounding by chest infections at early age, when asthma may be indistinguishable from infection. So, at least for asthma, it seems to be that at worst, it is a very trivial association and most likely an artifact. Well, really a artifact of confounding, which is just that the infections cause early childhood infections increase the probability of development of asthma. Doesn't mean that you caused asthma by giving an antibiotic.
Right. Yeah, that makes
Okay.
sense. Corporate
So then
capture?
yeah, corporate
Corporate
capture.
capture though.
Okay, we'll
I
go back
think
to the MAHA report.
I think also
Hmm?
probably I think probably we'll stop after corporate capture. Ultra processed food we already did actually. Didn't we already go
There were some other points,
because
but
I don't want us to
yeah,
cut it
yeah.
short. I want us to be able to go through things well, but I don't think there's any way we're going to get through. We're about halfway right now. We've already exceeded the playtime of Return of Kings. So, I mean, that's already
Well,
like
how many? Oh yeah, wow, we've
yeah,
gotten 3 hours
3
already.
hours.
I mean, look, it's ultimately I can go. However, it's ultimately up to you and how much brain power you think you have.
Well,
Um,
you know me. I will go for really, really long when I have the energy. Like when we would do some of those ones before, like I can do that again, get up
mhm,
early and then do a big long stream. But this one we
mhm.
started a bit late and my brain is definitely dying a bit. So I don't want to go
Okay, so
too
if
much
you
longer
think,
tonight.
sure. If you think that you are, let me know let me know whenever you want to stop. Then.
I say we stop after corporate capture and then pick up at
Yeah,
UPF
corporate capture isn't
next.
even really isn't even a strong. I don't think it's a
Okay,
big
let's just
point.
go as far as we can and
Yeah, 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 yeah,
let's
yeah,
just stop at
yeah.
10, let's say.
Sure. Sure. Corporate capture and the revolving door. Although the U.S. health system has produced remarkable breakthroughs, we must face the troubling reality that the threats to American childhood have been exacerbated by pervasive incentives
Perverse
that
incentives.
impact. Perverse incentives. See, my brain's dying now. That impact the regulatory bodies of federal agencies tasked with overseeing them. While Congress is ultimately in charge of authorizing federal regulatory agency research budgets, government funding has been a small portion of the totality of research dollars being spent on chronic childhood disease. The majority is funded by the food, pharma, and chemical, as well as special interest NGOs and professional associations. The following examples illustrate how deep and widespread this influence has become across multiple sectors. The food industry funds the bulk of research in the field. A BMJ analysis found that industry spent over $60 billion on drug biotechnology and device research in nutrition science. By comparison, the government spends an estimated $1.5 billion on nutrition research. Concerningly, industry-funded nutrition research may bias conclusions in favor of sponsors' products. Government funding for nutrition research through the NIH is only 1 to 5% total budget, and in some cases is subject to influence by food industry-aligned researchers. Moreover, the analysis reported that 95% of the 2020 Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee had financial ties to food and pharmaceutical companies. The chemical manufacturing industry spent roughly $77 million on federal lobbying activities in 2024, while 60% of their lobbyists previously had federal positions. In addition, more than 10,000 chemicals listed in the EPA's inventory are designated as confidential, and generic chemical names are used to identify them. The pharmaceutical industry from 1999 to 2018 spent $4.7 billion on lobbying expenditures at the federal level, more than any other industry. In addition, 9 out of the last 10 FDA commissioners and approximately 7% of agency's medical reviewers have gone on to work for the pharmaceutical industry. Over 80% of clinical departments and teaching hospitals at the U.S. medical schools receive some degree of pharmaceutical funding, while half the total cost continuing of CME is funded by industry. Between 2010 and 2022, industry provided $6 billion to over 20,000 patient advocacy organizations. Okay. His point here: money, lobbying, corruption. Okay. Let me make one point off the bat. So, one point off the bat is not that this was said. Conflicts of interest, funding sources are not a reason to flat out dismiss evidence. In fact, in many cases, it's the only real way you're going to get evidence other than things that American people are not going to accept. That being said, it is true that they're more likely to favor the
the only
industry
way
sponsor.
you're gonna get evidence, as in no one else is motivated to pay for the research.
Yes, to pay for it. Yes,
right.
Yes.
Like who want? Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And the thing is,
Now,
in industry funding, it is like a little red flag. Like the thing is, if you see this thing is funded by this group or that, like it's like if you see like a Templeton Foundation fucking study or something like that, like you know that they have their interests and they fund specific stuff. But what that should tell you is here's like a little indicator for the bias angle to look for. It shouldn't tell you that like there's really nothing more than that. It's just a signpost for like the kind of bullshit you might see. To actually say there is bullshit, you need to look at the methodology. So that should always be kind of the end of the day thing. So I just think it's important to strike the middle ground there between you're not saying to blindly like ignore the fact that there's motivated research going on. Like of course some amount of that's going to happen, but you're also not overstating it. It's like at best it's just kind of a little indicator.
Yeah. So also, I also want to say that motivated research design is not necessarily inappropriately motivated. Like it's not necessarily bad. So, for example, a pharmaceutical company or any company who wants to trial their product may take additional concerns to make sure that they've gotten the power analysis right, such that if they are confident, they're confident in their product, they believe the effect is there, but they really don't want to miss it and don't want to spend all the millions of dollars and then miss the effect size because for whatever reason they screwed up the power analysis or they miscalculated enrollment or something like that. They may take extra effort in doing that because it's their money on the line. Whereas if some researcher just got a grant, they may not take that extra effort in doing that. And they may be less motivated in finding the outcome that they're confident is there. That is an example of a motivated study design in which more effort is placed into doing that, but it's not bad. It's not inappropriate. In fact, it's good that they were doing that. And in this case, the non-biased, the non-financed researcher may have actually just missed that. So some of that motivated design is actually justified. And then there is some of the motivated design that's not justified. Damn lies and statistics and such. And that's where the rub is, and that's why you look through the methodology and results. So what I want to caution against is just this idea that, oh, well, if more studies funded by research align with the interests of the funder, then that automatically means that it's a delta from the true value.
Right.
Well, no, it could just be that it's also for justified reasons. It could be that the funders are making sure that the study design is not going to screw over their product from some stupid reason that some lone researcher getting some grant might have overlooked.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it could be very well be that. It doesn't have to be that. It could be malicious, but it's not necessarily malicious.
No.
And so that's one of the. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna basically restate what you said. I agree.
Yeah. So one of the things RFK says is that, well, if you look at the funding sources and what agrees with the funder's interests, the results tend to go along with that. So, but he hasn't provided any other way of disarticulating whether that is malignant or benign.
Right. That alone doesn't tell you anything.
Mhm.
Like, of
Right.
course. Sorry.
Yeah.
No, go ahead. That's fine.
And I'll just note that the same can be said about one of the foods RFK wants to defend, which is red meat. In fact, if you go to corporate capture, though, and look at the same thing.
Let me find that. Corporate capture, though, the same thing. Why aren't I seeing the same
chart? The chart. Go down. Chart.
1 second. Sorry, is it in Discord or in the report?
Yeah, in Discord.
In Discord.
Corporate. There's no though in the MAHA report.
Oh, versus.
Whenever you see though, though.
Sorry, is it this last one? Industry conflict drive clinical.
No. Corporate capture though.
I'm in corporate capture though. What am I? Which
scroll all the way down? Oh yeah, industry conference drive. Yeah, industry conference drive clinical evidence.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So I have that one open.
Yeah. So if you look at, this is just number of studies and whether the outcome was favorable, neutral, or unfavorable. Again, shout out to Crimeo. And it tallied which ones were funded, and all of the published clinical trials yielding favorable results for red meat's healthiness were published by the red meat industry. All published clinical trials yielding unfavorable findings for red meat's healthfulness were published by researchers without known conflicts of interest. And the neutral. And so, to whatever degree RFK thinks this is an issue, he should also think this is an issue for some of the things he's promoting. But what I would say is I still would caution against just looking at this and saying, well, it's a malicious thing.
Yeah, so it's like it backfires on you. So it's not
Yeah.
worth accepting, and even if you did accept it, it would backfire on you. Basically, is what you're
Correct.
saying. Yeah.
Yes, that's the point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very silly.
Okay, and then the other thing is, like, okay, this is the broader point about money. You need to provide a solution. So yes, there's no free lunch here. So you either are going to accept that industry is going to, in terms of lobbying, what do you want to do? If you want to get rid of lobbying entirely or something like that, you can just say that and advocate for that. In terms of funding research, there's no free lunch there. You either are going to accept that industry is going to fund research, or you're going to have to accept that it's going to be at the foot of the taxpayer, or you're just going to have to accept that the research is not going to get done. And so you can point out the big numbers, like, oh, this many $1 billion and everything. Like, okay, yes, those big numbers. What are you going to do? You want to put that on the back of the taxpayer? Do you want to fully socialize the research industry? I don't think so. But then what are you going to do? Where's the solution? Do you want all of pharma to be put on the backs of the taxpayer? All pharma research.
Yeah, it's kind of
if
like,
not where we. Yeah.
It's like, if you have a problem with this, what do you want to do about it? Because we presumably don't want to just stop the research, but then if we're going to continue it, how are we going to do that in a way that the funding comes from somewhere you're okay with, other than, yeah, I mean, socializing it, which I don't know. Is our RFK has some policies that are a bit out of the norm, maybe, or
Something tells me
what?
that if RFK came out and be like, "You listen, we just got to go socialist, guys,"
Yeah,
that might
sounds
be an even better way of getting rid of RFK than this video, or anything, I don't think this video is going to do anything, but
and then
yeah,
if
I mean,
not,
I don't think he's going to want to do that. Yeah, he's
yeah,
going to imagine the Trump party is, Trump administration is not going to go like, what is the goal there? The solution is going to be, well, forget about fixing any deficits. I can tell you that this is going to at least add 100 billion a year, at least, to the taxpayer. If you're all of pharma and all of nutrition research and all of this other, this is this is, and no one's going to accept this. Like, no one in the party is going to be like, oh, like, we just have to radically increase taxes and pay for those industries. Do big pharma's job for them. Like, all that research they're spending money on. Like, yeah, let's just do it for them at the back
yeah,
of the
I mean,
taxpayer. Can you imagine how that would be perceived?
no, like I mean, you can go the socialist route, and then yeah, good luck selling that, I guess. And then you could go the ANCAP, just depend on the people to naturally support it, but then you're just gonna have like not you're just not
No
gonna have
research.
the research. Yeah.
There's no RCTs. No phase 3 RCTs are getting done ever.
Yeah, it's interesting
So
to not
yeah,
just look at the complaint, but like what do you want to do about it? Like what do you, if you don't like this industry funding, if you what's our suggestion is let the industry spend their research. We can look at it, and if it's bad, we can point it out. Let's just do the thing that gives us the mountain of
yes,
research. Your
that's
suggestion is
that's where I'm
what?
now.
Just
Yeah.
not do the research, make the people pay for the research. Yeah, yeah, that's a good point.
Right. Okay, and then so we have that, and then next we have a shift to ultra processed foods.
Okay.
In
Oh,
the
we're
MAHA
into a
report,
new
it's a
section.
whole, yes, section. Yep, a whole new
Okay, well,
section.
let's fucking read through. Actually, is this maybe we should cut here, because is this
Hmm.
better to just like this could be what we launch into the next one with, because it is its own whole section.
It is its own whole section. Sure.
Yeah, because I
Uh,
don't want to rush through.
okay.
Because the thing is, this is one where we're gonna read through all this. We're gonna start getting into all your stuff, and I by the time we read through,
Mhm.
we'll just have a few minutes. Yeah, so let's do this on the
Sure.
next one. Let's open with
So
this.
so let's okay. So then let's summarize where we are now. Where we are in terms of part one is
Can I summarize some of it, and
RFK.
you do
Yeah,
the
sure.
bit?
Actually, yeah, it's better. This is better if you summarize it. Actually, yeah.
Okay, so well, I won't do as good a job, but then you can correct or improve it. So,
I want to make sure a lame person is able to summarize. That's a
well,
good point.
there's no way I can go through point by point, but I can go
No, no,
through
no.
the
Just a
big
summary.
picture.
Yeah,
Yeah. So,
yeah.
yeah, big picture is this article or this report. It's supposed to show that there's been a degradation of the health of children under that's attributable to the way the US health system basically, well, US food health, basically the US is making its children unhealthy. So they're starting from this data about children being unhealthy. There's things like the lifespan differences, there's stuff like the chronic disease, not actually all about children, but whatever. That's the data. So they give us that, and then they start explaining why it's like this. So their goal is to present the problem, explain why it's there, and then why it's there should lead into suggestions like
Solution.
prescriptions about how to fix it.
Mm.
And so far, basically, we've kind of gotten through the first two sections, not completely. And the overall response is just okay. A lot of the things that you're saying are problems in the first place actually aren't problems. They're just like misreadings of data or artifacts. And there's actually trends to how you're failing. There's like sort of some systematic problems you're doing over and over again. And then those things that we do grant are problems, we'll get around to what the best way is to address those. And then when it comes to not just here are the things, but here's the reasons why they're problems. Again, we already have a lot of them off the table just from pointing out they're not problems in the first place, but the explanations are often very sketchy. So yeah, the I guess the big high level summary is they're just saying here's the stuff that's going wrong, here's why, here's how to fix it. And your response is a bunch of that stuff isn't actually wrong. Your reasons for thinking the stuff that is wrong are often themselves wrong. And we'll get
Hmm.
around to the solutions because you're wrong about those too.
Yes. And one example of that would be the ADHD misreading of the study. But yeah, so exactly. That was actually a great way of summarizing. That's a great layman summary.
Okay.
Whole bunch of stuff you claim is wrong. Yep. That's not actually wrong. In fact, sometimes it's just right. Sometimes that's something going right that you're presenting as something going wrong.
Right. In fact, there's maybe an
And
important point, which is not the summary, but just a important thing to say. You've said it before repeatedly, but a lot of the doom and gloom, it's like you cut away a bunch of it that's just bullshit, and then a lot of what you have left is stuff that's actually good. So a lot of the doom and gloom here, if looked at through a like data aware, like statistics aware kind of lens, would actually give you reasons to be hopeful about the US. So we're being painted
right.
this really shitty, like kind of like anti-America almost picture, and the actual data is like America's kind of good on a lot of these things.
That's right. And of the things that we agree, yeah, so the things that you agree are real, the posited explanations are often overstated or erroneous. And the treatment is just the prescriptions are either not helpful or not stated, is in terms of like the monetary thing, like what you want to socialize it or not. You're just not committing to any solution. You're just complaining, or you're saying something is you're providing a prescription, but really that's just to take away the solution
Well, and
based on an erroneous read of medication like ADHD.
we haven't seen a lot in terms of prescriptions so far. Like, I mean, maybe
That
there's
yeah,
been some
we will get to that.
implications.
Yeah.
Well,
So
yeah.
yeah,
So
in terms
then,
of implications, but yeah, we will get to prescriptions. They
yeah,
will get to as the paper goes on, as the report goes on. We'll get to prescriptions. But so
yeah,
far,
because there's been like things they've said that have maybe gestured or that have raised questions about, well, what the fuck do you want to do about this? But we haven't
right?
actually gotten to the full on like, here's what we want, here's our plan to fix. So we
Yeah,
will get there, and that means
it's not that spoiler alert. It's not that impressive at all. It's not
I
impressive
picture it being like
in any way.
horrible, like natural remedy bullshit or something.
like like no, they didn't go. They didn't go that far. They kind of winked at that, but it's not. It's actually very banal and it's just anyway. We'll get to it.
Okay,
But
so
yeah,
basically what we're looking to do next time is we're going to keep going. So we're still in the in the thick of the everything that's accounting for the
yes.
diseases or the bad health, the alleged bad
Hmm.
health. And I guess next time we're just going to try to plow through more of that section, and if assuming we get through it, we get to the prescriptions, go through those, and that's our goal.
Do we want to take any questions or
Yeah,
do we
let's
want to
take
just?
questions
Yeah, all
when
right, fine.
we're
Yeah,
done everything.
yeah. Okay, got it. All right. Well, then we'll end the stream and we will see you in part 2.
And you have to end the stream because you have the little
Yeah, I
studio.
will do it right now. Yep.
Okay, all
Bye
right.
bye, everyone.